already? I was like, no, but that's how I do everything. So.
Right. Well, and hopefully it's like a little bit on me as the host to ask some
That's
good
what I was
questions
like, I'm just gonna go with the flow of what I'm doing.
pull out some info. So I guess starting there, Kendall, you want to just go ahead and introduce yourself and what your title is?
Sure. My name's Kendall. I have a PhD, so it could be Dr. King, but that holds a lot of historical value, so I don't care to go by Dr. King.
I was gonna make a joke. I actually thought about it like a day or two ago. I was like, oh, gotta make a Dr. King joke, but I actually forgot about it, so I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah. Well, I grew up, kids used to say, are you related to Martin Luther King? I say,
Clearly.
guys, he's my great uncle.
Clearly.
But yeah, so I have lived in Ohio for 7 years, doing my PhD at OSU, and I graduated last year, and so now I'm doing a postdoc, also based at OSU, but it's an NIH-funded postdoc.
What is NIH and what is postdoc?
Okay, so NIH is the National Institute of Health, and it's like the end-all, be-all of biomedical research in the United States in a non-private sector, right? So, and it even funds a lot of, it's like the greatest academic institution for biomedical health, one of the greatest ones in the world. And so it's based in Bethesda, Maryland, and I went to school in Washington, D.C., and it was on the Red Line, just, a few stops down from my university, and there was, I think, 24, 36, something like that, graduating biology majors, and they all wanted to work at the NIH, and I couldn't give a fuck about the NIH when I was in school. Because I wanted to go into entomology, something natural history oriented.
Gotcha.
And the sick joke is now I don't know what all these other students are doing, and they were all very bright students and very dedicated, and they worked so much harder than I did in college, and now here I am with an NIH
Nice.
postdoc.
Oh, that's funny.
So National Institute of Health, they fund R01 grants, or like their biggest as far as my understanding, and this is all very new to me. So this is like a new area of like the grants, the funding and stuff, and I've always followed NIH people on Twitter, and I've kind of like absorbed that, but my advisor gets NIH funded grants. So R01 grants is what he applies for, and so they are funding a lot of his lab work. And so a postdoc is, can kind of be a broad definition, but usually it's after you get your doctorate degree, and it's like an extra extension where you just do research. And a lot of postdocs, and I really didn't want a postdoc. It's, I was as bratty as it sounds, devastated to take a postdoc after.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful opportunity, and it sounds really annoying. I was like, I didn't want to do a postdoc after I got my doctorate's degree, but it's very common that you do need a postdoc in order to go into industry, get a really good industry position. But to me, postdocs always seemed like a really glorified lab manager position where they always just seemed used and abused. They're like, don't have as much agency as the PI, the principal investigator, the main advisor who owns the lab. They seem to be overwhelmed with all of the logistics of the lab, and many, many postdocs can be incredibly unhealthy. There are also, so I'm in an academic postdoc, there are private postdocs or in industry postdocs. So there's postdocs at Johnson & Johnson.
And they also do research for those companies.
Yes, they do. And what's interesting was when I was trying to decide, did I take this postdoc? I really don't want a postdoc. I want to go straight into a job. I wanted to get paid money,
So you're not getting paid?
No, get paid, but not the money I was
Gotcha.
wanting. So I doubled my income. So if that says anything about how little I was getting paid as a PhD student.
Sure.
So I was getting paid I took home about $22,000 as a PhD student per year.
Gotcha.
And now I get paid, I would probably take home around $38,000-ish, but like on paper I'm getting paid like $50,000 or something like that. So, and I was we were wanting to move to Baltimore, live in the Luminary.
For sure.
Which is this, like, we just saw, like, the Luminary is like part of our lexicon now. It is this bright, sparkling building in the middle of Baltimore with like a rooftop pool and all this stuff. And the Luminary was what I wanted to do. And it's the thing that motivated me to get out of grad school. So I would like look on Zillow and I would find all these apartments. I'm like, I'm going to get this kind of job. I'm going to get this kind of job. And then so I was trying to decide, do I take this postdoc or do I hold out and be unemployed still? Because I was unemployed for like 7 months.
Right.
And then I had all of the, like I applied to over 400 jobs
That's exciting.
With a PhD. Now, I was switching from entomology to, I was trying to go into bioinformatics, clinical research, biostatistics, something like that. And so it was a very opportunistic jump. But yeah, so this postdoc is, to me, and my advisor is very clear on this, and everybody's very clear on this, so I don't care that it's going to be published, but the postdoc to me is a stepping stone to jump into a much higher level in industry.
And so when you say like higher level, is that like higher level in research? Like what does that mean?
That's a good question. So I've never been in the industry, right?
Sure.
I've been a student my whole life. I wear a backpack to work since I was 5 years old.
Gotcha.
And so I've never been in industry, so it's I can't talk about it too much because I'm super ignorant about it because I've not actually stepped foot through the door. But I could have started off as a junior bioinformatician, or if anybody would even take me, I was having a really hard time I had a couple contracts in line for a biostatistician, which is clinical biostats. Okay. Basically, the scientists do the clinical research and you inform the mathematical side. So is this a statistically sound approach to doing this type of research?
I got
The spooky thing is the clinical researchers aren't always stats experts. In an ideal world, you want your scientist to be a stats expert,
sure,
right? That's not how it works, and it's because they've broken it down into this major hierarchical system. That's not like academia, because academics don't. Well, they do. They can collaborate with other people and pawn off their biostats to other people, but usually really good researchers, they have the biostats aspect. But in the clinical research area, you've got people working on mice, you've got people working on cells, and then you've got the people like telling them what to do. You've got the business and the board saying, we want this kind of drug done. And then you've got somebody who's got to like interpret all of that and manage all of the data.
So is it like overly specified what each person does? Like each person doesn't do enough, like there doesn't have enough general skill set, or maybe it's not that they don't have it, but they're not allowed to.
Yeah, I'm gonna say this, and this is probably not super accurate, but it's kind of like McDonald's. You know how McDonald's broke it down to there is one person flipping burgers, there is one person doing fries, there is one person doing just the nugget, and then you get the big system that is McDonald's. You have the full palette of food that McDonald's has, but in grad school, I was my own biostatistician. I was my own researcher. I did my own lab.
Gotcha. So you learned those things.
Yeah. So in these things, the people who are doing the clinical work in the lab, they're not writing their own grants. They've got grant writers for that. You know, they're not doing their own stats. They've got stats people for that. And so that's kind of the positions I was going for because that's the skill set I had.
Sure.
But nobody would take me. And a lot of them, they went 3, 4, 5 years of industry experience.
Sure, that's tough.
Or a 3-year postdoc or something. So I kind of was forced to do a postdoc in a way, not really, but yeah, and there was logistical things about I didn't want to keep being unemployed, and I finally applied in Ohio because I was really trying not to apply in Ohio, and Baltimore, and between Baltimore and or between Maryland and Boston is kind of like the Silicon Valley of biotech.
Why is that?
It's the NIH. You've got all these major pharmaceutical companies are based out of there. Johnson & Johnson in New Jersey. Yeah, so that's just
kind of where they're all located.
They're just all located over. No, there's San Francisco, and all of them have their own bioinformatics, tech, more computer science based stuff. But pharmacy is on the East Coast.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So everybody's like, why are you trying to go to Baltimore? Why are you trying to go to Baltimore? Many reasons, but a lot of the reason is they've got 1,000 jobs there. You've got Johns Hopkins there, which is a major
institute. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
So. I do know about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, cool. So, entomology, study of insects.
Yes.
Correct. That's what you got your.
That's I got my PhD. Okay. Yeah, I spent 6 years. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. So, why?
Why entomology?
Yeah.
This is so funny. People ask me that all the time when I was in college, and I was a little defensive about it because I'd say, why garbage truck? Why, why be a lawyer?
Sure.
But it's just always the first thing I say, I study insects. Why? It's never like, I'm a dentist. Why?
Why do you want to clean teeth?
But I get what you're asking.
Well, so the first I learned about entomology was in the forensic entomology
Yes.
sense.
Yeah.
And so like and that might have been
How did that come about?
oh, like somehow in like elementary or middle school, like it came up, and I really don't remember. It was so long ago, but they were talking about how you're able to determine how long a corpse has been dead based off what insects are on it. And like there's an order of operations for insect population in a corpse. And I don't remember what year I learned that in, but that's just whenever I think of entomology, I think of forensic entomologist.
Interesting. Yeah, so I didn't do forensic entomology.
Right.
So I got into entomology really by accident. Everything I've done so far has really been by accident. Like I got this postdoc by accident. And I thought I was applying to a research associate position.
Oh, okay.
And the response was, hey, thanks for applying. There's an NIH fellowship if you want it. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay. But when I got into entomology, I just moved from Florida to DC.
Nice.
And in Florida, I knew all the animals. I really thought I was going to be a herpetologist, kind of, because I liked the alligators, all the snakes, reptiles.
I know what herps are.
Yes, and so I always thought, okay, well, I like natural history. I didn't know the names of streets, but I knew that on the corner of this street that there is a dogwood that was going to bloom in April and again in November. And those were the types of things I knew. That's how I saw the world. It's very through a natural history perspective. And so in college, I had just moved to DC, and I didn't have any friends, and I also didn't know any of the natural plants, animals, and stuff. And my mom and I were hiking a lot. Mm-hmm. I spent a lot of quality time with my mom, and it was beautiful and it was interesting. And I was like, but I don't know anything. And that felt very uncomfortable to me because I grew up in Florida and I knew all the plants and animals.
Sure.
And so I went to not the grocery store. I went to the bookstore, and I found like natural history books where you have the ID books of like all the trees of North America, all the blah, blah, blah. And I just got a big stack of them, and I was running through them all, and I got to the insect book, and it was Insects of North America. And I'm blanking on his name. It will come to me at some point.
Okay.
But the author is really cool, and he does beetles, and I have like 3 of his books upstairs, and I can't think of them.
Nice. Right. Oh, that's funny.
Dr. something, Dan something. We'll stitch it in the...
I'll send it to you.
And it was on Insects of North America, and I was flipping through this book, and these insects were so colorful and so fascinating. They look like alien creatures.
They do look like aliens.
Things I've never seen in my life. And I was thinking, oh, this must be out in the Southwest. This must be in, wherever... South America, even that was North America book. I was like, there's no way those exist here. I've never seen any. A lot of them overlapped in DC. A lot of, because they have these maps, and I'm obsessed with maps. So I love maps. And so they've got these like areas. It's really cool how they calculate these too. Have you seen that where you're like, okay, where are this certain lizard is from, and it will show like that little area on the map that's like blue or something.
Yeah, they'll color code it. Yeah, I've seen those.
So it's very cool. I don't remember exactly how they calculate it, but it's kind of a cool process how they develop those too. And I looked into it after getting this book, so I was just learning a lot. And what I was really fascinated in is the back of the book showed how to start collecting your own insects. And to be careful about, there's some that are endangered, blah, blah, blah. But I was going on all of these hikes with my mom, and a point of meaning for me was to start finding these insects that I found. So I bought the book, and I started looking out for all these different insects. And I didn't really know much about insects at the time. I knew enough.
And so when is this? What year are we talking?
This was 2013. So
okay.
So I just graduated high school.
Yep.
Now I'm going into college. I moved to DC. School hasn't started yet. I haven't made any friends, and I don't know anybody. And so I'm just hiking with my mom and collecting insects. And I put them in little Ziploc baggies. I take them home, put them in the freezer, and then I bought pins. And I would pin the insects, and I'd set their wings so that they're like displayed. And I would start learning as much as I could about this insect, what its role was in its environment, why is it here, where is it, distributed, and then I followed the author whose name I can't remember on Facebook, and he posted, he said, hey, I'm doing a book signing at the Smithsonian Natural History Museum downtown.
Oh, wow.
And at this point, college has started. I'm in my first semester. No. It'd been my first full year. I was in my second year.
So sophomore year.
Sophomore year, autumn semester. And I saw this on Facebook, and I just kind of been following more insect stuff, kind of getting a little bit more interested in this book signing. And I was like, this is a really meaningful book to me because it got me introduced to DC, and it gave me a lot of purpose in a time where I felt like uncomfortable. I just moved at 18. I'd never lived.
Sure.
I was culture shocked in DC.
Right.
We had no family or friends, and so it was a meaningful book to me, and it provided a lot of purpose in my life to find these insects. And so there was like it was like kind of an emotional tie to it.
Yeah.
And I wanted to meet this guy and kind of tell him, like, hey, you changed my life. You know,
right, yeah, for sure. An idol.
Yeah, like Star Wars, you changed my life. This changed my childhood. You changed my freshman year of college.
Sure.
And I was a real weirdo. I found a praying mantis at Home Depot when we were buying this butterfly bush for my mom's backyard, and I found a praying mantis on it, which makes sense. Praying mantises eat other insects, and this butterfly bush is very aromatic. It attracts a lot of bees and things.
Sure.
So they sit there and they wait and grab something and they eat
freaks.
it.
Talk about an alien-looking bug.
And it freaked me out. And so here's the thing: I don't like touching the insects. I'm afraid of being bitten. I'm kind of a scaredy cat around them.
Yeah, I get that.
And so I had this praying mantis, and it wasn't an adult yet. It didn't have its wings, and I was. Is that okay?
Yeah, it should be good.
Like, okay.
It's still recording.
Okay, cool. The sick part is I kept it so that I could grow it until it molted into an adult, and then I was going to kill it and put it in my collection. So I kept this praying mantis as a pet. Okay. So that it would turn into an adult.
Sure.
And I got it from Home Depot, and I put it in a cup, and I asked the woman as we were checking out, it's like, is it okay that I take this praying mantis? And she's like, honey, I don't care. You know, like,
yeah, I might.
Yeah, she's like, ew, get it out. And she doesn't know it's a beneficial insect. I thought sometimes they purchase these insects
on purpose.
Yes, on purpose. So I thought maybe she didn't know. So I took it, and I had it in my dorm room with me with my roommate.
Nice.
She thought I was a freak.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I asked my roommates and stuff. I asked my friends, hey, do you want to go to the Smithsonian? Do you want to go to the Smithsonian? They're like, no, that sounds like something for old people. That doesn't sound fun.
Oh,
to get a book signed.
Boo.
Yeah, I know.
That's
and
weak.
they weren't entomologists. And
Sure.
so I asked my favorite old person, my mom, and I was like, hey, do you want to go downtown? There's a book signing. Maybe we could go get dinner. We can walk around the mall, the National Mall outdoors. And she said, sure. And so we go to the Smithsonian. And we go through the back, the Constitution Avenue entrance, which is not the big front on the mall. Okay. And so I thought we were in the wrong place, but we open the door and it's dead. It's like the lights are off. There's a security guard sitting in a chair. He's like, "Can I help you folks?" And I was like, "I'm here for a book signing event." And he's like, "Are you here with the insect people?" I said, "Yeah, probably. That's probably who I'm here with." And he said, "Hold on, I'm gonna have somebody come down and get you." And I said, okay, this is really weird, you know. Yeah. And I just thought it'd be like in the lobby or you'd have a table out. Sure. And so this guy comes down and he picks us up from the lobby, me and my mom. And he's asking me, you know, what school do you go to? Who are you? What year are you in? And I was like, I'm American University. I'm a sophomore. And I don't know what I'm doing here.
Sure, yeah.
He goes, oh, well, he's upstairs. And I said, okay. And so he's navigating through the back collections of the Natural History Museum. Cool. Where there's hundreds of millions of specimens stored. Sure. Probably 1 billion specimens stored. And it was the weirdest thing. And, you know, it's like not anything anybody gets to see.
Sure, you're behind the curtain.
Yeah, there's millions of people who visit this museum. And
that's a great experience.
Behind the scenes. And then we go to this weird, dusty little room. There's a bunch of old white men in this room. And I spot the guy. I'm like, that's the guy. But we're all sitting and there's some guy at the front and they're doing motions. So like, all in favor of blood, say aye. And they're like raising their hand, they're saying aye. And I'm like, what did I just watch?
The entomologist Illuminati.
The Entomological Society of Washington.
Oh.
Which I'm a formal member of.
Legit. Now. Are you serious?
They make you eat an insect to join.
No, they do
not.
No,
they don't.
Oh, okay.
So I found a seat in the back, and there was a guy. Again, I don't remember any of these. This is so disrespectful. There's another guy, and, you know, there's a bunch of guys in here, and he was presenting on the olive fruit fly in the Mediterranean, and I was taking notes. It was about evolutionary history, and I was in an evolution class, and I wasn't doing well in my evolution class because I didn't study, I didn't read, and so I was like taking notes. I was like, oh, talk to my professor about this. She's gonna like get massive brownie points. And at the end, I'm like, okay, this is so fucking weird, you know, and I just get all this boring stuff over with. I'm going to talk to this guy. And he had a display of insects. He's like, hey, guys, I have my new book, you know, like, if you want a copy, you know, I've got a few free copies here. And these are like his peers. These are like other entomologists. Okay. I'm sure they want his book, but they've got 1 billion books on entomology, you know. Sure. It wasn't like... It was so bizarre. And so I was trying to make a beeline to this guy, and I had my book in my chest, and my mom's trailing behind me, and there's this kind of man in my way. And he's like, or he's not saying anything. I just see him peripherally. I'm not looking at him because I'm looking at the guy I'm trying to get the book signed by. And my mom says, Kendall, I think this gentleman wants to speak to you. And I'm like, yes. You know, I was like, what are you going? I was like, everybody's leaving. This guy's leaving. And he's like, hey, I had introduced myself because I was the only person in the room that wasn't recognized.
Sure.
They were like, who the fuck is this?
Yeah, what is this person doing?
And, you know, how about new members? Do you want to introduce yourself? And so this guy who was wanting to talk to me, he had just introduced this student of his, a research student from France. So it's like, damn, how do you become one of those? She must be like the coolest person, smartest person in the world. And so I recognized him from introducing his student, Marion, who I ended up working with. And he said, hey, I really like your personality. Do you want an internship?
That's crazy.
I was like, yeah, sure. And he said, yeah, okay, send me your resume and let's set up a time you can come downtown and let's chat and let's make sure it's like legit. And
make sure you don't suck.
I'm looking for students like you, you know, with your personality and stuff. I was like, okay, fine. I didn't even get my book signed. I didn't even get my book signed. And then so I went in and so Bob Kula is his name, Robert Kula, and he's just the coolest. And he mentored me for 3 years at the Smithsonian.
Wow.
I became his research student after multiple 6-month internships. I published my first authored paper. I described a new species of insect.
That's right.
Yeah.
So what was that? What did you discover?
It's a braconid wasp, which is a parasitic wasp.
Fuck wasps.
So yes, this is everybody thinks of stinging wasps, right?
Yeah.
The ones, paper wasps, yellow jackets.
They all suck.
These do not suck.
Nice.
They are the most diverse multicellular organisms on the planet, and nobody knows about them.
What makes them the most diverse?
That's what I did my PhD on. They are literally the most diverse. They're the most species rich. There are more species of parasitic wasps on the planet than any other animal.
What?
Yeah.
And what's up with that? Like, why do they just have like a genome that's prone to mutation or something?
So it's because they are specialists. They are highly species specific. And so this is exactly what I did my PhD research on.
Oh, let's hear it.
I did the genomic. This is why I'm in bioinformatics now. It's not such a crazy switch, you know, because I was looking at the evolutionary components. And so we were looking at chemosensory speciation. And speciation is when an insect literally starts from an ancestral. They usually get split up somehow, become reproductively isolated. The genes they start adapting in their own direction.
So they're different enough they can't reproduce.
Yes.
Or if they do produce an offspring, it's like not fertile.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And so this happens because if you have a tiny wasp, and the wasps that I was working with weren't even a millimeter in length. The one I discovered was about 6. It's a big one. Yeah, this is what this is big.
I didn't
in the area.
know.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
I don't know if anybody can see that. And so it's about a centimeter, and it parasitized moth larvae. I don't know exactly which one, but it was discovered in Acadia National Park. They send all these like tubes of little parasitic wasps. They set up malaise traps, which is a sheet, like a thin sheet of like mesh. And so thin enough so that they can't pass through, right? Small enough. So it's like a net that they set up, and then the net is angled upwards, and then it's got a tent like this over it, and it's also got a trough at the bottom with ethanol in it. So some insects, when they hit something, their instinct, like beetles, is to fall.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Into ethanol, they're dead, and then we collect them and we send them to the experts. Some insects, they hit it, and their instinct is to go up. Okay. And so in the tent on it is white, so it still emulates like light passes through it. So they say sky, and that's all they think. They're probably not even thinking. They're just instinctually sky. Right. So they go up and then they follow upwards, and so because it's angled like this, and then there's a little trap here with ethanol, and they fall in, and that's how we collect them. So we've got a trough and a bottle up here, and so all these parasitoids, they either fall or they go up, and then a lot of the little tiny ones we collect with pan traps, and so usually they're yellow. We spray paint them yellow because they're attracted to yellow. A lot of them are pollen feeders. So even though they parasitize other insects in their adult form, they usually eat pollen and nectar and stuff. And most insects, if you were walking out in a field and you see an insect that flies past you and it doesn't want anything to do with it, it's not landing on you, it's not getting in your eyes or your mouth like a fly would, it's likely a parasitic wasp. So a lot of people think they're gnats and stuff, but they're little parasitic wasps. And they parasitize plants. So we've got gall wasps.
And so when you say parasitize, does that mean they like lay their larva in them?
Yeah, they'll lay their eggs. So gall wasp will lay their eggs inside of the leaves, and you'll see them all about in the summertime. If you see a leaf with like weird warts on it, those are gall wasps. There's some flies that do it as well. There's
like their eggs.
They lay their eggs inside of the surface of a plant, and then it changes the genetics of that plant to produce a home for its larvae.
What? Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
So the plant actually is what grows the wart thing over it?
Yes, and it produces starchy substance, and the larvae will feed off of that food, and then it will pupate inside, and it will emerge as a fresh wasp.
So when you say change its genetics, is it like, the eggs are laid, and then there's like some sort of signal that is sent to the plant, and it grows this thing? Like, what? I guess, like, I understand what's happening, but like, what do you mean when you say it like changes its genetics?
Yeah,
like the plant's genetics?
so I don't know exactly how gall wasps work, but it will send a signal, and signal transductions within a cell eventually get to the nucleus, and that's what turns on transcription factors, which are the proteins that read the DNA to produce more proteins, right? So everything's proteins talking to proteins talking to proteins.
Right.
To get starch or whatever, because the protein's going to be the thing that makes the starch or sends the starch out. So, it's usually a complicated cascade system process, but eventually, at the end of the day, it's telling the plant there's something here. The plant doesn't reject the animal.
Okay.
It's just through. It's really hard to conceptualize the timeline, but it's through hundreds of millions of years of evolution.
So is it what's the word? Is it like a symbiotic relationship? Does the plant benefit, or
no,
is like
it's true parasitism.
Okay,
right?
so the plant gets the short end of the stick.
The species that I discovered lays its eggs, and they've got these really long ovipositors, ovi starting from egg, posit, So it's like this really long thing, and sometimes they're flexible. And so braconiid wasps in particular, which is what I was studying when I was at the Smithsonian, have these really characteristically very long ovipositors, and they will lay their eggs deep inside of wood. They'll lay their eggs, and usually it's to target wood-boring beetle larvae, so that's why they have to go so deep. And so the longer the ovipositor, it's kind of like Darwin's theory of evolution with the long beaks of various birds is related to their function, and so same with the length of the ovipositor. The ovipositor can also have like receptors on it, so it can smell through its ovipositor whether the type of insect it wants is in this environment or something.
Gotcha. Or even if there's something dangerous down there, it's like, oh, nope.
Or if somebody else has already laid their eggs there. So a female who finds a caterpillar and she starts smelling the caterpillar, she uses her antennae and they tap the surface of the whatever it is, their host, and they can smell the other wasp, or maybe even her own. So the insects that I ended up studying here at OSU were egg parasitoids of southern green stink bugs, and which is really cool. It's really of interest to agricultural systems because it's a biological control agent. So instead of spraying pesticides, which target all kinds of insects, you can find a very targeted insect that very targetedly affects the one pest that you're interested in. And this is especially interesting because it targets the pest before it even hatches. So it targets the egg of the pest. So it doesn't even have the chance to hatch and start feeding on the plants. And so it also can parasitize the brown marmorated stink bug, which is a devastating pest introduced in 2015 to the United States.
On
in
purpose?
Pennsylvania. No, never on purpose.
Right.
But usually they just get carried from, the east.
Yeah, they're like on some like a boat or something.
And they are prolific because they have no natural predators. And because that wasp that evolved hundreds of million years along with this stink bug is also in the east. It didn't get carried along.
Sure.
It doesn't sit on plants.
Right, so it can just run rampant.
So we have used this species, and it's Trisulcus basalis is the name of the species I studied, and it's a millimeter in length. It's a tiny little black, very sclerotized, which makes very hard exoskeleton.
Okay.
And they're like little tanks. They're the coolest looking little things. Maybe I'll send you a picture.
Nice. Yeah.
And they would parasitize the eggs of stink bugs, and stink bug eggs are also about a millimeter in all dimensions, right? So they're like little balls. And we know that they're attracted to the smell. I was studying the smell, like how the insects smell or chemically detect and specify on these stink bugs, because if you think about a tiny little wasp like this, they aren't going to use their vision for things, right? Because if they're trying to find a stink bug and they're navigating in the world, they're not going to be able to see the stink bug.
Gotcha.
Also,
like they're too small to perceive something that's bigger than them like that.
Well, they're just think about like being that small and flying through grass. It's gonna be like flying through the rainforest,
sure,
right?
Of course.
And so you're gonna have all these obstructions. You're so tiny, and also they're far away from you, so you're not gonna see. You're gonna smell it, and so you're gonna navigate to the smell, land, and then they smell some smelling molecules, odorants, are more aromatic, meaning that they lift off and travel. They're more volatile, travel farther, or they're less volatile, which means that they degrade, or
and they just dissipate.
Yes, and so there is a track on order in which they detect more volatile chemical cues, and then they detect surface chemical cues, things that stick to the leaves. And so the female will come and she'll be like, I'm really close, but she's still not really using her eyes.
Sure, it's all simple.
And then she gets to this egg mass, and there's probably around 30 eggs, and she'll lay mostly females, and she'll lay 1 or 2 males. And those males, they will hatch, and they will mate with all their sisters.
Yeah, they can. Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so they're mostly inbreeding.
Sure.
So if you think about it, if a female wasp undergoes some kind of genetic mutation, a random genetic mutation that affects the proteins that sense the insect, and all of a sudden she can now not just smell the one insect that she's targeting, but another species of stink bug. It opens her opportunities. So there's a chance she will land on a different stink bug egg mass of a different species, and all of her progeny will inherit that genetic mutation, and they will now be able to smell that, and so you can see.
And so that's how they can diversify and then specify into new species quickly.
Yes.
Oh, that's
and so
badass.
This is why they're so incredibly diverse.
Right.
Yeah, and
cool.
very cool insects. I mean, I credit them to becoming a scientist in the first place. Like, it's just the coolest thing. And so what I was doing a lot of like protein interactions with these molecules. I would simulate that on the computer. I would use like AI and deep learning models to, and this was all very fresh and new for the end of my PhD. So I just started consuming it like crazy. Like, what can I do?
How can I use these tools? Yeah, right.
With tons of data that we already have, where I don't need to go into the lab.
Right.
I was like, logistically, I don't want to go into the lab anymore. I've got to pump out another few chapters, and I can do it all on my computer at home. And I looked into some very cool stuff, but it taught me the bioinformatics skills that then I saw more opportunity in biomedical research, not in entomology. Entomology is like very cool, but outside of the applied entomology, which is agriculture, developing, I don't know, like pest related chemicals, treatments. I have no interest in that.
Sure.
It's very agriculture based. I don't care. I care more about like the bioinformatics side, which is like the computer science of biology.
Gotcha.
Having huge data systems of genomic, proteomic, metabolomic. These are all different types of data that you can use to answer big questions.
What questions would you like to answer with those things?
So right now, we are using huge databases full of genomic material. So right now we have 500,000 human genomes for, this is called the UK Biobank.
Okay.
And so we just got access to this. I haven't entered it, but we're totally switching gears here. 500,000 human genomes. If the human genome has hundreds of millions of genes.
Right.
And we're looking for one.
Sure.
Not just one variant of a specific gene. So even within a gene, you can have a lot of variation.
Okay.
That's how we have different eye color.
Right.
And so this gene is the sweet taste receptor. And it is discovered on the tongue, which is why it was named the nomenclature sweet taste receptor, but it functions as a nutrient receptor on your muscle cells. And so
hold on. So the thing that picks up the gene that picks up sweetness on your tongue also has a function in the muscle cell.
Correct.
With regards to absorbing nutrients.
With detecting
nutrients.
Telling the cell there's glucose out there.
So it doesn't absorb it, lets it know that it needs to be absorbed.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
again,
I follow.
Signaling.
Sure.
So it's a GPCR, protein coupled receptor, which will mean nothing to nobody. So
wait, but say that again. Say the abbreviation.
GPCR.
And it stands for?
G protein coupled receptor.
Okay.
So it's a receptor. So it's on the surface of the cell. So if the cell is like, it's got the membrane, it's stuck on the membrane. It's got an intermembrane area and an outer membrane area. The outer membrane area binds to and detects glucose, aspartame, other types of nutrients. Yeah, sucrose, fructose. And then the inside has a G protein that once this is turned on, meaning like everything has to, and Sean and I sit down here and we do these kind of teaching motions.
I saw all that.
That's like, and I had just erased, it's like a very simple thing that's like explaining anyway, but I was telling him everything's a chemical interaction.
Right, and it's all a cascade effect.
Yes, and so and we say turning on and off because that's the easy way to anthropomorphize what's happening, which is just chemical interaction of the glucose or the aspartame or whatever into this protein. It changes the shape and it changes the chemistry.
Right.
And its ability to interact with other things. So it turns on the G protein, and the G protein now goes to another protein, or it sends a cascade signal down into the cell, which reaches the nucleus, which tells them to turn on certain genes.
Right.
And turning on a gene means read the gene, make the mRNA, produce the protein.
Gotcha.
So you can go from one glucose molecule to hitting that cell, depending on the cascade and the amplification within the cell. If that signal is amplified, it means that you can detect one glucose molecule, and this is more common in hormones, right? Because you have tissues that are very sensitive to hormonal regulation. Like I take birth control, and it's a tiny pill, and it massively regulates my system.
Sure.
Because this one little estrogen, this estradiol, touches a receptor on the surface of a cell, and it gets amplified, and it says we need to produce 1,000 of these from one. So you can amplify a signal and produce so much of whatever it needs.
Sure.
And it's a negative loop in birth control. So that's not the best example, but so we don't know.
Negative meaning closed, like it stops?
It's a negative feedback loop. So as long as it's negative. So as long as a certain it's positive feedback loop. So as long as you have the presence of a certain, I think this is right. God, somebody's going to call this out.
That's okay, but
either way, let me
right.
think through this. It's as long as there is the presence of this hormone, which you take by pill.
Sure.
It will maintain a certain function. It won't release an egg, right?
Gotcha. Right.
So in men, it's hard to develop birth control options because they have negative feedback loops. So as long as it's not there, or as long I don't know. Either way, you can't take it away. You have to provide. So for testosterone, it's positive feedback. So as long as testosterone's always there, then it will, you'll produce semen and all that stuff.
Sure.
Now you can't it's easier to give somebody something to make it present.
Right.
Versus take
then
something
take it away. I see what you're saying.
Your whole body.
Sure.
Away. Versus providing a very specific levonorgestrel estradiol in combination maintains, it is a negative feedback loop in your body. So as long as it's not there, then it will release an egg. So you just want to make sure it's there all the time.
Right.
Right. So cell signaling is a huge part of everything that happens in your body. What we don't understand is what signals, what pathways, we call them pathways, which is just there's specific corners of, your body that have certain proteins that interact with each other in a certain way. So there's a pathway for Alzheimer's.
Right.
And those are proteins that might interact in a lot of different other ways, but when we define a pathway, we look at what specifically how are these proteins interacting under this condition or within this context to affect the disease of interest.
Yeah, well, I mean, on the Alzheimer's front, I mean, that's why I feel like the heat therapy, the sauna, the red light, that's been so popular recently, is because now the studies are showing, X amount of time reduces your risk of Alzheimer's by 20% at this dose per week, or 60%, if you're doing 20 minutes at 180 for 5 days a week, and it's just if I can just sit in a sauna and it's those heat shock proteins, and just reduce my risk of Alzheimer's, sign me up. I mean,
Isn't
that's great.
So what somebody had to do is figure out that the heat shock protein participates in that pathway,
right?
Which you would never think of,
right? So it's we might not know how to cure Alzheimer's, but we can reduce your risk of it by 60% if you're doing this lifestyle habit, the preventative medicine. So
we're working backwards in the lab I'm working in now. We work with muscle metabolism, and diabetes research is what the umbrella is, but specifically with muscles, skeletal muscle, there's cardiac muscle.
Right.
which also expresses the T1R2, which is our gene of interest.
And that gene does?
That's the gene, that's the nutrient receptor.
Yes, okay, perfect.
But we don't know how it's signaling. We don't know what it's doing. But when we see in our little petri dishes, we grow muscle cells.
And this was with what you did on your Instagram. Like
yes,
this is what I was like, wait, what is going on?
Yes. So when you grow these cells in the petri dish, you see that when you knock out this gene, so it can't produce this nutrient receptor on the surface of the cell anymore, the cells can't differentiate. And so they go from being little individual myoblasts, which are by themselves non-functional, little muscle cells by themselves. But then when they differentiate, they fuse together and form fibers.
Sure, which is what we get, which is what we have, right.
And so if they can't fuse without insulin,
can't fuse without insulin. Okay, yeah.
Then there's obviously there's something going on in the cell that receptor informs somehow differentiation. It tells the cell, hey, there's glucose present, we need to differentiate. Or it's not using glucose at all, because there's serums that we use, and we call it media, and it's this red media, and it's medium to high glucose media. Okay. It's universally used for the specific cell line, C2, C12 cells, which are muscle mouse cells. And they're used for all different reasons. People look at all kinds of stuff, and they just differentiate the cell, and then they do the experiment. They don't care how the cell differentiates. We have noticed that our gene of interest affects differentiation, so now we have to study the process of differentiation.
Sure.
And we find that, or I'm finding that the wild type cells are the cells that naturally express whatever you would find in the wild or in a normal mouse. And so they have the taste receptor. We find that media goes from being red with the glucose in it to being very yellowy and nasty. So as it metabolizes, it's metabolizing glucose. The knockout cells, with insulin, they do differentiate. But they don't use any of the glucose. And so it stays very red, even over the course of a day.
So real quick, when you're saying differentiating, what do you mean again?
So these cells are fusing together, and you can see that on the plate.
That's what that. So when the cells are fusing, that means they're differentiating.
Yes.
Okay,
they
gotcha.
fuse into myotubes and stuff.
Yes. So that I'm familiar with.
Yes.
So can you just say that again with the glucose staying with the red and the yellow?
Sure.
Just so I can understand.
So during differentiation, they have to use up a lot of energy.
That makes sense, to fuse. Okay, now I'm getting
your body usually uses glucose, right? And so you take in a meal. Glucose is in your circulating through your blood. You have these nutrient receptors. Blood, there's glucose in the blood. We can grow. Start sucking it up.
For sure.
Your body releases insulin to tell your cells to suck it up.
Yep.
And what's interesting is this taste receptor, when it's removed in the presence of insulin, which is what you would normally find in your blood, right? You release insulin. You would normally take up glucose. They don't take up glucose. But they differentiate.
But they're still fusing.
They fuse so much better, so much more.
Without this receptor.
Without the receptor.
What does that mean? Like,
so
why is
what we find in mice is that these mice, without the knockout mice, they have better exercise training tolerance. They have lower prevalence of obesity, diabetes. They have they maintain as they age. They maintain the youth of being healthy.
Lean muscle.
Yes, of the muscle too. Muscle mass maintains as they age.
So that's just so confusing. Just not because you're not being clear, but just like, why, if that receptor's not there, the receptor which like lets them know whether or not to absorb this nutrient, why, if it's not there, they're still fusing and doing it better?
Lipids, I think. I think they're using fatty acids rather than glucose, which fatty acid oxidation, all of that, it still feeds the mitochondria. You can still produce a lot of ATP.
Yeah, I mean that's what you and I are using right now, just chilling.
Yes.
Yeah, mostly fat.
Because I haven't eaten since 6 yesterday.
You're definitely there.
And I don't eat. I usually eat around 6, 7 p.m. and then I don't eat again until around 1 p.m. the next day.
Oh, so you have a big...
I do, because I don't move, because I sit at a computer all day.
Sure. And so, I mean, that's fair enough, though. It's like
so that's how, because if I eat too... I mean, I'm not burning what I'm eating.
Right.
And so I fast, basically, and then I eat a small lunch at 1. I'm not even hungry by 1. I see the clock and I go, oh, shit, I better eat, you know? And then I eat, and then I'm hungry again because I turned on all of my signaling. Like, okay, food's available.
The metabolism has started, like,
you're getting hungry again, even though you've done absolutely nothing.
Right.
and then 6 p.m. comes, I eat a bigger dinner, and then I go to sleep. The metabolism slows down, and then in the morning I'm not hungry. And so
you probably sleep pretty well.
I've always slept really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a good sleeper. But yeah, so what I'm interested in now is knocking out a gene is the most extreme version of getting rid of that gene possible, right?
Yeah.
But there's variants of this gene that affect, it's basically a partial loss of function. So if you have one single nucleotide, which is like ATGC, right? Gattaca, whatever. Like those are the nucleotides that make up your DNA. 3 nucleotides in a row code for an amino acid, which is one part of a protein.
Sure. Yep.
So if you knock one of those out, or change it, you can totally change whatever that amino acid is.
Right.
And that amino acid now changes the chemistry, potentially, of an entire region of a protein. And so this is called a single nucleotide polymorphism. One single nucleotide difference between all these people. It's called a SNP. And SNPs have to be prevalent at least like 1% of the population to be considered like a polymorphism and not just a random genetic mutation.
Sure, okay.
And so we find certain loss of function SNPs exist in human populations at around 3%. So about 3% of the population everywhere. Everywhere across the world. Except for, I think, in Guyana, I think there's a higher prevalence of this, which is interesting.
Oh, it's an increased amount.
Yeah, or a higher percentage of people who have specific loss of function SNPs, so they aren't functioning as well. And we find that these people, there's a study in Oaxaca, I believe, Mexico, that because it's global, right? So you can knock it out just in the muscle and it affects your muscle, but it's also affecting your tongue.
So they don't perceive sweetness?
They don't consume as many carb-rich foods.
Right, because they're not they're not getting the dopamine response from the sweetness, so they're not like, oh, more.
And we find that mice and rats do the same thing. They are likely to take in more lipids than they are sugars, which end up a slower metabolic rate,
right?
But a much more efficient, in a way, metabolic rate. And so we're curious, and this is why we have these massive biobanks. This UK biobank has 500,000 human genomes from the UK, Wales, all that.
Yeah.
And they also have all these clinical factors, right? So what is their blood glucose level? What is their muscle mass in this tissue? Muscle mass in this tissue, brain scans, all kinds of stuff. They have almost everything. It is such a massive amount of data that no human being could go and find the patterns between them. So what we have to do is we have to develop deep learning language models, all kinds of stuff to be able to find,
just sift through all of it,
associations between the prevalence of these SNPs in certain people in 3% of the population and these clinical factors that indicate that they are healthier people, especially in aging populations.
So what do you mean by associations?
So you can never prove that something's one-to-one correlated. So you find kind of associations where people with this SNP tend to have greater muscle mass, lower levels of just improved levels of whatever we end up measuring. And I don't know the clinical factors yet because I'm so new to this.
Sure.
But whatever indicates that these people's muscles are functioning at a better rate, metabolic rate, whatever, than people without the presence of the SNP. And so you find associations. And so usually this is like correlation, right? So by the prevalence of this versus the prevalence of this, and you have this. It's 1-to-1. That's like every single time you have a prevalence of this, it's going to match up with this.
Gotcha.
That's not even, we never see that in biology.
Sure.
And that's the R value, right? But R squared equals 1.
Okay.
R squared equals 0.6 is huge. That blows all of our minds. So I have been finding in mice, so I've been doing on smaller scales, across 42 mice, 12 of which have lower levels of the T1R2 expression, this taste receptor. So it's not like loss of function, but it's lower concentration or like lower prevalence of this protein in their muscles, in the muscle tissue specifically. So it's called transcriptomics. You take just the muscle tissue and you can isolate how many of these proteins are being expressed in just this muscle tissue at a time. So you take 42 unique mice, you measure the protein expression of these various proteins within the muscle only. So this has no impact on the brain, the tongue, anywhere. And you want to isolate these tissue-specific protein levels. And so we take this transcriptomic data, and then we can look at associations with that same mice has all of these different it's not exactly the same mouse. It's the same strain of mouse. Mice are so inbred that they have very specific strains. And so you can say this exact strain of mouse has this level of this taste receptor in their muscle. Lower taste receptor in muscle seems to be highly correlated with increased muscle mass.
Right. Okay. I follow you. Yes.
So that would be, or it'd be like this, right? It'd be a negative association or a negative correlation. You can't say, hey, this definitely causes it, but you can say, we find that lower expression seems to be associated with clinical factors indicative of muscle preservation, improved biogenesis, improved protein turnover.
What's biogenesis?
Is like just synthesize metabolism. Protein turnover is consuming proteins to make more proteins.
So I hear biogenesis, so I'm like, I know what those words mean separately.
Yeah. That's why I say I study Sean's always like, I don't know what to tell people what you do. I'm just tell them I do molecular biology.
Gotcha.
People know what molecular means, they know what biology means. They don't know what entomology means, they don't know what bioinformatics means, but they know, what those two words mean.
Okay. I remember molecules, and I took biology. Yeah. For sure.
So so it's been a huge transition over to that.
Whew, that was dense.
I know.
That's so cool, though.
And that's why I didn't practice talking about this, because you just never know.
Yeah, but that's good, because then you're also like, are just getting to articulate your understanding to yourself.
I know.
So,
absolutely.
you get to you're just reaffirming what you know.
Yeah.
Which is so cool. So, okay, so I kind of want to explain my understanding a little bit of that. So, I am not a doctor. I'm a group fitness coach and a certified personal trainer and a certified nutrition coach. I was really into the life sciences growing up. It was super easy for me to do well in biology.
Yeah.
Biology was the only AP class I took in high school. And when I went to OU, I went the pre-med route. Didn't know I signed up for pre-med until I went to... Well, I got to orientation because I was just wanting to be a physical therapist.
At least you didn't get to biochemistry and be like, oh, should I sign up for?
Well, so I guess I was just like, I didn't understand the gravity of what was going on. So I got there and they're like, oh yeah, this is a pre-med program. I was like, sick, I'm pre-med. Like zero thought into the work that was going to go into that. Like, oh yeah, I'm pre-med. Didn't even mean to, but now I am.
I'm a doctor.
Yeah, it's going to be sick. Don't even worry about it. And my first semester, I just didn't have the work ethic. I didn't care because the way I wanted to live my life, or I guess the way I thought I was going to be able to live my life in college, didn't align with working hard in school. I was like, because I was always reasonably clever, so I was like, I don't have to do stuff I don't want to do. Right. Like I'm gonna outsmart the system.
I have a very similar approach.
Because I'm so clever. And so I just didn't do any of my homework, and so I had to switch out of pre-med immediately. Yeah. After my first semester, I had to undeclare.
If you don't try, you fail in this class.
Immediately, and it wasn't
because it's so scaffolded and built on top of each other. If you didn't understand last week, you're not going to understand anything today.
Right. Yeah. And so if you're not paying attention and you're not doing your homework, well, you can't coast. Even if someone could take those classes and think it easy, but they still have to do the homework and take the test and do well. They're like, oh, I think this is easy. Well, you're never going to think it's easy if you don't pay attention. And so anyways, so I fell out of that. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is I have a reasonable understanding of biology and a little less so of chemistry. I was always more interested in biology, but you get to a certain point in biology where you have to know your chemistry.
You have to.
It's non-negotiable. And I have a reasonable understanding of the formation of the larger systems, like the muscle spindles and so on and so forth. I am well versed in the parts of the cell and that sort of thing, and it's very interesting to me. So I feel like I'm at least a decent person to talk about this with, because I have some foundation, but a lot of this is reaching. So hence my questions. What is this? What is that? Just for the sake of clarification. But I think that's why when I saw your Instagram story about the receptor and the muscles, or the cells joining together, even though the receptor wasn't working, I was like, wait,
I know.
Hold that I know enough about this
exactly
topic to understand that something fishy is going on here that needs to be I guess researched more. So I couldn't believe that that's what you were doing. So just keep me posted on all that.
And I love posting that kind of stuff, one, because it makes it interesting when I go into the lab, and at least if I have to look at these, I want other people to have to look at these on the side.
Right, I totally get that.
But also, I really like communicating science, and I know that we haven't known each other very long.
Sure.
But through COVID, I was constantly posting, like, not policy. I don't want to post policy. I have opinions on policy.
Sure.
But I only posted science because you can't argue with it. You can't argue with it. And when it came to COVID, there was so much misinformation too.
Yeah.
And
that was hard.
Yeah, it's really hard. And
even now it's hard because it's like there's been like a breach of trust.
Yes.
Over the past 4 years.
And people are done. They're just done. They're like, I haven't died yet. Nobody knows died yet. So I just don't want to pay attention.
Right. And so it's like how now it's like finding how much do I care? And I don't mean that just like for me, but in general, I feel like people are trying to figure out how much do I care?
Yeah.
About all this in general. Right. How much do I care about the flu? And you're always going to have people that are like more germophobic than others, and care more about that stuff than others. But yeah, so I guess from like a science perspective, because you had mentioned in here that you taught a virology lab for 6 years to pre-med students, and that you're a COVID fanatic.
Yes, yeah.
And so how did you qualify to teach? How do you become a teacher? And how did you become a teacher in that department? And then I guess because I guess part of what's confusing about the disciplines of science is there's like a lot of cross-pollination.
Yeah.
And so like, how do you specify in one field, say entomology, and then make the transition that you did, which I feel like you've very clearly illustrated, and that makes perfect sense. Like, how did you end up teaching a virology lab?
So this is a lottery system in a lot of ways. Grad students without funding, without fellowships, which I didn't have because I didn't have the grades. I graduated 3.2 GPA. I totally credit my research about who led to me getting into 5 different grad programs. I felt like hot shit when I got 5 programs wanting me. Like people apply to PhDs in their first round and don't hear from anybody.
Oh, okay.
It's very hard to get in. And so I always say to my students, who you know, not what you know. It's really important. You have to know stuff too. You have to know good people.
Right.
And so, I didn't have any funding coming in, no fellowships. My advisor didn't have any funding, still doesn't. I think he's done. I'm tired. And so he was kind of fading out, and all of his students had to teach to get their stipend. So in order to get paid, I had to teach.
Okay.
Well, there's an agreement between the entomology department at OSU and the life science education, CLSE, Center of Life Science Education. And they have a teaching program where students get funneled in there and they use the TA labor to satisfy their lab instructors.
Sure.
I got really passionate. So the first semester I taught macrobiology, basically structure, evolution, bird, all that kind of stuff. That was fun. I hated the lecturer that I taught with. And the next semester, they really needed somebody in a more advanced teaching role, and they liked me. My first semester, they're like, Kendall, we think you're the kind of person who we really need people in this course, and it's really tough to teach because it's crazy, and it's an experimental lab. And other labs, we call them cookbook labs, because the students, they come in, they learn a concept, they fill out a worksheet, and they turn it in the next week. And then the next week, they come in, they do something completely different. They do an activity. All of the outcomes of the activity are predetermined. And then they fill out the worksheet, show their understanding of the concepts, turn it in. This course that they scouted me for was called CPHAGES, Science Education Alliance Phage Hunters Guide, something else. So CPHAGES. And so phage is short for bacteriophage.
Yes.
It's a virus that infects and kills bacteria. And CPHAGES is a program internationally, but definitely nationally. Arizona State does this, a few other universities do this, where students collect dirt and then they isolate from that dirt the bacteriophage present because they're ubiquitous. There's 10 to the 31 of these viruses on the planet.
Oh, no.
It's like the viral load is insane.
Yeah, I'm sure.
They don't affect us. They affect our bacteria. And so there's bacteria in the dirt. There's going to be phage in the dirt. This is how it works. There's phage everywhere. They're floating in the air right now. They're on these big boys. Big Joes.
Yeah. Shout out Big
Joes. And so the students collect them, they isolate them, and then they feed them a very specific bacteria. So there's like probably hundreds of millions of different types of phage specific to various bacteria, but because we give them one bacteria, the ones that are specific to that bacteria will continue to grow, and we continue isolating those, and then we classify them. So really it was just because I started teaching for money, because that's my only option. I wasn't going to go to grad school if I didn't get paid. And that stipend, my labor for the university covered all of my educational costs too, so I paid no money to go to grad school. I got paid to teach.
Slay.
And although I really resented people who had fellowships because they only did research. They made so much more progress on their PhD thesis for research and I had to teach. So it's very inequitable. It's a huge issue. But I love teaching. It became the most tangible, meaningful thing I did in grad school.
Why is that?
The success of teaching is very tangible. Versus like studying this random insect and doing stuff. Nobody reads my thesis at the end of the day. It doesn't feel very rewarding, you know.
So I guess the transfer of knowledge is what's rewarding, and seeing people know something. Yes, the mentorship.
Yes, the mentorship is the most important part.
Yes, for sure. I would agree with that.
Yeah, because I tell my students first day every semester. I got onto this really fast because I got really sick of the grade squabbling over micropoints because they're pre-med students.
Sure, right.
They're there for an A.
And they're probably
they think the barrier between them and an A is you.
Right.
Not their work. You know?
Right.
I tell them you start at 0 and you add points on every assignment. You don't start at 100 and I take away points.
Right, for sure.
You assume you start at 100. Yeah.
Right. That's a great way to phrase it though.
Yeah.
That you put your name on it.
Yep.
And then then you're at 0. Right. But now I know who the 0 goes to.
Yeah. No names in this.
And then from there, everything you add on is an additional point.
So I told them.
That's great.
First day, I love teaching, but I got really sick of that. So first day, I said, everything you're going to learn in this class, even though it's a specialized class, it's an experimental course, you could have learned online for free for the last 15 years. Mm-hmm. Why are some of you paying $1,500 to $3,000 if you're out of state for this course alone?
Right,
this class costs $1,500 for an Ohio State student, a citizen of Ohio. Mm-hmm. For the kids who come in from all over the place, it costs $3,000. What are you doing in this class?
Yeah.
And they just, like, they're really taken aback.
This is the path that I chose.
Yeah. They're like, for the degree.
Yeah, Dr. McMoney.
Yeah. Well, I need a degree. I said, okay, so why'd you choose Ohio State then? Why aren't you at CC State where it costs, whatever?
Right.
$300 per credit, versus $1,000 per credit or whatever it is. And they don't know. And I said, okay, you got a degree, you got somebody from Ohio State, you got somebody from Harvard. Why would you pay so much extra to go to Harvard? Mm-hmm. Why is the Harvard degree so much more expensive than the Ohio State degree? And they can't answer. And it's either because they're not paying for their education.
Sure.
Somebody else is. It's a drop in the bucket. Or it goes into this insurmountable pile of debt that they don't even think about. Because they have been told,
this is the path.
In society, you have to get a bachelor's degree and biology is successful and you need, or there's kids who, you've got to be a doctor. Their parents are like, I'm a doctor, your parents are a doctor, but you have to be a doctor.
It's
so they just get in here.
Yeah.
But they don't think about what is it that they're paying for in the classroom.
They're not like actually critically thinking about what they're doing.
And so they feel like they're being punished. They're paying to be punished by me in the classroom. I said, no, you're making an investment in this classroom.
Yes.
What is the investment? Why is the investment so much higher at Harvard than it is at Ohio State? Mm-hmm. It's the voucher. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, it's the voucher. Harvard has much more connected people vouching for these students, right?
For sure.
And so OSU has highly connected people too. It's a great school.
Oh,
especially for biomedical
it
stuff.
borders on Ivy League.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially for that area. And I said, so what you are doing is you're paying somebody like me who has way more credentials than you to say this person's qualified to do this.
Right.
That you are paying for me.
Yes.
That's why you came here. That's why you're not learning it online by yourself at home.
Right.
You're paying for me to say this person did it.
Well, it's accredited. If you learn it online, you could be a master. You could figure out credible sources from not and synthesize it yourself and then have the skill set of being able to do that and be such a great critical thinker. But no one's going to buy it.
Right.
Because you're not an accredited
and
person.
there's a huge flaw to academia in that way, right?
For sure.
You could have people who are incredible scientists, but they can't do science under a non-institution. Like,
right.
Well, because then it runs amok,
Right.
And I get why they do that. But
sure.
Anyway.
And that's not to accredited institutions either, because it's like credibility is important. You have to establish that. So it's like I get it. There's just nothing is perfect.
So the students, the first day, I say, so you think about that. You come in here with that attitude. If you are paying money for this class, I'm not forcing you to come to this class.
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't care
seriously.
I literally don't care.
Because I'm also not going to invest in you if you're not investing in the class.
Well, what I do tell them is I am committed to being a resource for you and doing my job as well as physically possible for you to take advantage of, because you're the one paying for this. And so I'm holding up my end of the bargain, and it doesn't matter to me whether you hold up the end of the bargain, because I'm going to come with whatever I come with to the class anyway. I'm getting paid to do a certain thing. By the way, their money doesn't pay me, which is weird too. You know, their money pays for football, which then pays for me. You know, I don't know how that works.
Right.
It's not like their money pays for me. So it's just a bizarre environment. But I made sure to nip that in the bud day one. You come in here, you're paying a hell of a lot of money to gripe and moan about learning. But you could learn all of this online, which you wouldn't. So you're paying a lot of money to have somebody to keep you disciplined to do it, first of all.
Right. Here's the spin.
Yes. But also, it immediately, set the tone for the classroom.
Because attitude and perspective is everything.
Yes.
It really is. I had a professor, and this was, so I got a degree in outdoor rec and ed because I got to a point where I had to pick one. And that's that story. I always joke, I'm like, I got a major in playing outside. But but I had a professor, this guy was the best, Danny Twilley. And I think he's at West Virginia now, but like WVU. But he, like, some people didn't like his style, but for me, I thrived under it because, like, he was like, if you don't ask any questions, I assume you have none. Yeah. And I'm like, blessings. Because of the attitude I had at school, like, I was just like, no one's calling me out for any of this stuff. Like, I can just do anything I want. Yeah. No one's calling me out. So, like, because your whole life people were like, oh, like you got in trouble for doing things that were bad. And, you know, you go to college, that won't happen. Well, it doesn't happen. You're like, oh, no one's calling me out, so it must not be bad. Yeah. But then, like, your life and your grades suffer, and it is bad. Right. But you're the one who's responsible for it. And so,
which is a new concept.
Yeah, for sure.
You're responsible for your own failure.
Right. And I also didn't think I was going to fail. Yes. So it's like, well, this is not what I thought was going to happen. Yeah. So first, it's accepting that you're failing, and then figuring out how to do something about it. Well, this guy was like, yeah, if you don't ask questions, I'm going to assume you understand. Well, I'm like, well, that's brilliant, because now it's my problem.
Yes. Yeah.
And then it was such a relief. I'm like, well, I can do something about that. Yeah. You know, so it's actually super liberating. Yes. Because then you have agency again. Right. And so I think that is great.
Well, I had such a similar attitude in undergrad, which is rare for a true pre-med student. And I took a lot of pre-med courses because I was like a pre-med program, but I wasn't interested in that at the time. But yeah, I remember there was a professor of mine who was like, "Come on, you're not doing your homework. You do really well in lab, and you write amazingly on these lab reports, but you're not doing the homework, and you don't study. It doesn't seem like you're studying for these multiple choice exams." I said, "I don't." She said, well, why? I said, well, because I don't want to.
Right.
Because if I can do enough to get a B- in this class, that's good enough for me. I'm not here to prove to you. Like, I'm getting what I want out of my money for this class, which is a little non-traditional, but I don't care about your validation of what I know. I care about what I can take from this class. And then I had this whole conversation. I learned about this, and when I was on this walk, I was thinking about how the plants do this and how the grass goes through the same Krebs cycle, blah, 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 all these different things. And she's like, so you're understanding it? I said, yeah, but not to the point that I can prove it on an exam. Also, I'm not good with reading comprehension.
Gotcha.
With some dyslexic.
Sure, I
just swap around. I just really struggle with that. And so it makes me feel bad when I try really hard and still don't do very well.
Dude, that's also a thing. Yeah. It's like you can't fail if you don't try. Yeah. Well, but you end up failing. But yeah, it's bullshit.
Because my students, they'll come and they'll be like, Kendall, I studied for hours. I said, well, then you didn't do it right. You shouldn't have to study for hours. You should be able to basically absorb it in class and then not study at all. That's easier said than done because I've taught this class for 12 semesters, right?
Right. So you've done it 6 times over or 12 times over.
Yes, and it made me a better student. Teaching made me so much better of a student because I understood.
Right. It's another way of learning.
Yes, but also I get what the purpose of exams are because I hated exams. I hated all this stuff. And I had to tell my students that I can't know for sure that you understand, like, the whole purpose of grading should only be for you to communicate where you're at and for me to communicate whether you've met the standard of where I need you to be at.
Right.
That's it. And so unfortunately an A ends up being boiled down into a person's perception of themselves, their value, how they are in society, which is it's so much. I think we should get rid of grades altogether.
So how do you think we would evaluate?
It's impossible, unfortunately.
Sure.
It takes a lot of mentorship. You need a lot more people. But it's just, I think it's a really flawed system. And because we have massively emphasized testing in school, the students come as freshmen to my class, sophomores, whatever, and they just think about testing. What do I need to do to get the test scores? And some students are really good at test scores, but then they don't understand the science, and they can't apply themselves in an experimental setting in which you fail. And it's consistent, you fail.
So is it like a lack of creativity?
It's a lack of trust in oneself. It's a lack of understanding of actually learning. A lot of it's memorization, but they can't apply anything that they've memorized to a new concept.
Right.
So I tell them all the time.
Which is that's like the critical thinking.
Yes. And so that's where I started bringing COVID into play because it was so relevant in the classroom. It's relevant to all of our lives, but also it was relevant to learning data literacy in this classroom because what I started noticing is students can't interpret graphs. They can't read papers. They can't interpret graphs in papers. They don't know how to build a graph. They don't know how to design an experiment because when you design an experiment, you think as scientists always saying, what's the figure I'm going to publish? What do we want to say? And how are we going to analyze it? And so that almost always comes first. And then the design of the experiment comes second to fit that.
That was hard for me when I was in the pre-med route because I didn't want to learn that.
Yes.
I was like, ugh.
Yes.
I was like, I just want to do science.
Because it's taught poorly.
It's taught poorly. And so it was just so boring.
Because then you take a stats course, and I hate stats. I hate stats course. I didn't even do well in my stats course in grad school. And I mean, I got through. I did fine. But I hated it, and it's because it's not taught in an applied way. You don't understand you just under the curve all the time.
I didn't know. I need a why.
You need
I'm very much a why guy, and so that's why I'm I love stories because there's either an inherent theme or value or lesson, an arc that even if you can't articulate, you track emotionally, and that's what can make something learning how to plot graphs and challenging.
Which is storytelling.
Yes,
Science is storytelling.
But
it's done so poorly.
Right, but if you don't know that and you're a freshman, you're I don't care about this. And the lab you're doing, they already know the answers to it because you're a freshman. You're not contributing to a body of work or anything. So it's look at this thing under a microscope and the results are expected. And so it's very much feels like you're just checking the boxes and you don't know why you're doing it.
Right.
At least that was my perspective.
Yes.
People do well with that, and so I'm not shitting on the premise. I'm just saying that's why it was challenging.
It's taught really poorly. So I worked with a few other educators, a few other TAs, a few other instructors to try to revamp how we teach data literacy in the classroom. Because one, they're not learning it in school. They're not learning it before they get to us, and we expect that they know it, and then we throw stuff at them. They can't absorb it. It's bouncing off of them, and then they just funnel into the next class.
Gotcha.
It's like No Child Left Behind in college.
Gotcha.
And it's bad. It's really bad. We are sending students out into the workforce who cannot read graphs, cannot interpret anything. And
not good.
It's not good. And it's contributing to the issue of doctors not knowing science and not being scientists.
And we're talking medical doctors now.
Doctors.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I feel like that was part of the trust breach with COVID was I feel like people really now, and I hate generalizing. Yeah. And I hate saying people, because what do I actually know?
Yeah.
I talk with my circle of folks, a lot of whom in the fitness industry, very whom are scientifically literate.
Yeah.
And also my friend group, and some of whom are and some of whom are not. And so when I say people, I'm really saying from my understanding of people based off social media, which is just this warped thing. So it's I hate having to generalize. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to try and do it in a way that I feel is somewhat accurate. So we'll see. But I feel like the whole COVID thing breached trust with medical doctors because people learned, and maybe people don't know this, but now they should if you're listening to this, that they're not research trained.
Yeah.
And that they might not know how to interpret scientific data. And in fact, they're just basically told this is like how we're going to do this. And the whole treatment with COVID initially, with like ventilators and all that, was just like trial and error.
Yeah.
But, and you know, hindsight is 2020, where it's like, oh, you send like hot compressed air, you know, for days on end, you're going to fry the lungs. But
yeah.
So maybe that's not a good thing. But at the time, like,
yeah,
you just don't know with these people coming in.
Yeah.
So I feel like we have to like rebuild the trust between like the average person
yeah,
and the doctor.
well, and quite frankly, people are doing what they're supposed to be doing right now, which is trusting their doctors.
Yeah.
But doctors don't understand the science, and so doctors are ill-informed, unfortunately, a lot. And
yeah,
like,
which is a bummer.
I have diabetes experts coming to this lecture I'm taking right now, and they say we have no cure for diabetes, so the only thing we know to do is tell them to lose weight, and we're not even sure that's effective, you know, as often as it could be. There's and that's okay. That's they are acknowledging that there is a lack of scientific background. We don't know. Like we meaning the human race doesn't know. But there's a lot we do know, and
this is type 2 diabetes.
Type 2, type 1, whatever.
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
yeah, type 2.
Yeah, type 2.
Lose weight.
Yeah.
And so that's all they know what to do, and so that's all they can say. And but what's interesting with COVID specifically is a lot of doctors, they get wrapped up in the politics of it because they're political people, like everybody is. We all policy affects all of our lives, and so it's really hard to practice science-influenced medicine in a vacuum. It's hard to do that. And I think when people go to doctors, they need to go in with a critical mind because you are paying for a service. Doctors forget that they are service-based people.
For sure, 100%.
They forget that. They think that I think a lot of them have this attitude that their clients come in and they need to be served. Like, yeah, you're serving me by losing weight. No, you're serving me. I'm paying a hell of a lot of money for this service.
Right.
And you have poor bedside manners. You can't explain anything.
Right.
You're not a teacher.
I've spent most of the time with the nurse. I've only spent 15 minutes with you, and you're giving me like the most general information for like the average.
Yes.
And you know, maybe the average information works for the average person, but like, you know, there's people outside the bell curve experiencing symptoms that might not relate to what you're saying. You know what I mean? And so it's like, you need to pay attention, or you need to run other tests, which are expensive.
Yes.
So, you know, so it's
but
tough.
also that they end up paying for anyway. Like, hey, I'm coming in, I say I need this test. I understand it's going to be expensive. I think I'm immunocompromised after having 3 rounds of COVID, and you know your body better than anybody else.
For sure.
And doctors know people's bodies better than it. They understand the bell curve, right? The name, but you know what's right and wrong for you. They don't know what your baseline is. They don't know how you feel, you know.
I think part of, and I don't know what the general person experience. I'm a fitness professional, and I'm like pretty good at what I do.
Yeah.
And I have a very good relationship with my body, and like you know, you can talk to Sean about this, but like when him and I were living together, there was this period of time where like every morning I would have like an hour of myself where I would go in my closet, have the lights off, and I would just lay there and meditate.
Yeah.
And so the point of that story is just like, not only do I have a good relationship with my body, but there's like different types of meditation you can do where you like sync your breath up with your heartbeat, and like I can slow my heartbeat on purpose. And so like I'm very in tune with myself, and I think I probably to like a certain degree, like I'm fairly advanced in that, even compared to like other fitness professionals. And so I think it's sometimes I understand from a doctor's perspective that while the individual does know their body better than the doctor, and people are having experiences, it's like, to what degree is someone aware of what is happening? Because sometimes, you know, I've trained people, and it's like, you ask them after they finish a set, where did you feel that? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, well, you just did it. Yeah. And so they're not even like paying attention, building the mind-muscle connection. So I'm like, okay, next time we do that set, I'm going to ask you while you're doing it, where are you feeling this? And so there's like a certain personal responsibility I feel like individuals have to take in terms of like building a relationship with your body.
And doctors must be so jaded by that.
Sure.
Right? They come in and people are dumb. Like, and they're not. Right. I think people are so smart, and I think they choose to be dumb, and it's very frustrating. And so I think doctors must be frustrated. Get what you're saying there. We all have the same opportunity.
Doctors too, because doctors choose to be dumb about certain things, like, you know, outside of your area of expertise, whatever it is, like people are ignorant. Like default is ignorance, you know what I mean? Right.
My least favorite sentence on the face of the planet. But yeah, so I had a doctor. I had an ovarian dermoid cyst. Are you familiar with dermoid cysts? Derm means of the skin.
Yes.
Stem cells, and it says a group of stem cells that get usually lodged on bony structure, typically in utero. So it's something you develop as you're developing.
Oh, okay.
As lump gets stuck in the wrong place, and a lot of times
typically on like a bone.
Yeah, a lot of babies are born with these on their brow bones, the back of the skull.
And it's just a cluster of stem cells that formed where it shouldn't, and then became like a bony protrusion.
No, it becomes anything that derives from the skin, so it can have hair, teeth.
Oh my God, I've seen those. Oh, they're disgusting.
I've never seen one because it happened to me, and I don't want to be traumatized.
I've Google imaged it before.
I had one this big in my ovary.
Oh my God.
And I didn't know. I would have never known.
How would you have?
Yeah, and well, you'd think it would show, right? Like you'd think something that big, at this point, babies this big, women are showing in, you know, like in their stomachs. But I didn't know, and so it flipped. And it flipped enough times to where it twisted the fallopian tube.
Oh my God.
And it started cutting off oxygen to the ovary. Yeah.
Oh my God.
And so that's why it was so painful, because it became...
And that's bad, for obvious reasons.
It became not circular. Somehow it became ob-formed or oblong, I don't know. And so the mass of it was undistributed, and then it flipped when I was sleeping or something.
Get out.
And I woke up and I felt like I pulled my back. And I also felt like I had shit at the same time, and I felt like I had period cramps. And I was like, what is happening?
Oh my God, it sounds like you're pregnant, you know?
Yeah, and it was just horrible. And I went to teach, and I was just like, I was sitting like this, and my students are like, "Are you okay?" I was like, I don't know. And so I got somebody to cover me, because I taught 7:30 a.m. lectures or labs, because they had the lowest enrollment. I had the fewest papers degree. Like, it was like I gained this system, but it meant that nobody could cover me at 6:30 in the morning when I woke up and felt that.
Gotcha.
And so I ended up going to the ER. They I was like, I think I might have kidney stones, and I go in already with suggestions, and I'm really fortunate. I think there's a lot of things that contribute to this. I sound educated. I look smart. Just the way that I enter, I have this certain level of confidence. I tell the doctor, I think I have kidney stones because of this, this, and this. They're reasonable reasons. And then so he's like, okay, well, pee in this cup. And he's like, oh, I don't see any just yet. So he's like already buying into the fact. So he wasn't like,
sure.
Because I came in with so much confidence.
Sure. And he's probably like, oh, sick. Like, this chick knows what's going on.
Easy.
Yeah, probably is what she says it is.
He's like, we're going to do an MRI scan because, or a CT scan, I can't remember. And because because we don't see kidney stones, and you're not testing positive for, like, you know, calcium buildup or whatever. And it's like, okay. And he comes back, he's like, do you have a dermoid cyst? And it was like, derm means skin. And he's like, yeah. He said, you have teeth in your ovary right now.
Oh, here, dude. That's crazy.
I know, isn't that crazy? And he's like, and he explained what happened. He's like, so you're feeling a lot of pain. I sent this image to a specialist. He is like the best in the area to do this. He wants to see you tomorrow. This is really important. So my mom flew in the next morning. I wasn't dating anybody. I didn't have any support. I didn't have any friends at the time.
Terrifying.
And a lot of my friends had moved and graduated, and so I was like just by myself. I didn't have anybody to go to the hospital with me or anything. So I went, and he scanned it, and he's like, you have a dermoid cyst this big that needs to be cut cross-sectionally from your body and taken out. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, this is a major abdominal surgery. So I formed this fun relationship with this doctor because I asked all these questions. Let me pull it up, actually. I have a list of questions that I still, and some of these are depressing because it had a massive emotional impact on my life. But let's see. I went in, I had all these really ovarian cyst questions. That's what, like, can you get pregnant with one ovary? If he removes the whole ovary.
Yes.
Will I need to be scanned?
Is the answer yes?
Yes, yeah. Okay. The second ovary will just pick up the slack.
That's crazy. But so wait, but do you lose some of your eggs?
Yeah, I would lose half the eggs.
Okay, that's what I thought.
I don't care about personally. Well, I need to be scanned regularly for the rest of my life. Do they grow back? And he said, chances are it won't grow back, and you won't need to be scanned. What is surgery like? How long will it take? So these are really practical, but then I had some funny ones like, how does weight affect recovery? Which he didn't really answer. He was like, if you look like me, I'd be concerned for you, but you look like you, so you're going to recover really quickly. He was a really big guy.
Gotcha.
He's an OBGYN. He's really stressed. And he's like, another thing, I do these all the time. he's like, don't worry, I've got you. I do these all the time. I said, all the time? How common is this? He goes, do about like one a year. I was like, that's not all the time. But that was all the time to him. And one of the things is like, look at this.
Wow.
Yeah, these are the questions I asked him.
He was probably dead. Like, oh my God, this chick is funny.
Yeah. And then so.
It's probably a breath of fresh air, though.
Yes, and so I think he was fascinated by that, and I'd start coming in for checkups, and he's like, "Oh, my buddy,"
Nice. Like, oh, that's awesome.
But I told him I can't remember how this came up, but I said something like, "Yeah, I just don't like something, the question. I don't know. Basically, I said like, women are treated like they're dumb," and he's like, He's like, you really don't understand. He's like, you are probably surrounded by smart women who understand and take ownership of their reproductive health. He's like, women come in here and I ask them, what birth control are you taking? And they say the one that prevents pregnancy. And he's like, they really don't understand it.
No.
And I said, that is not their fault, though. He goes, I understand, but you can understand how frustrating it is.
So whose fault is that?
I don't know. Evangelical Christians, who knows whose fault that is? But it's a whole science. It's a massive taboo to understand your body to the depths too, because you just put it on somebody else, right? I mean, you and I wouldn't think that, but
yeah, I guess I have no clue.
So here's an anecdote. This is why it's bad. I was introduced to birth control, the concept of it, in 9th grade. Like I knew what it was before, but I was introduced professionally by a nurse in the classroom during health ed, and it was like co-ed, so boys and girls in the classroom, and everything in between. And she said, she's talking about birth control, and I was like, what does that work? That's like crazy. How do you take a little pill and it prevents pregnancy?
Right.
Like, I wanted to understand why. That same thing. And she said, she goes, you don't need to worry anything about that. The only thing you need to worry about is this right here is going to prevent pregnancy.
Oh, okay. So I do have beef with that, because we had the same thing when we did sex ed, where they had, and like I to a certain degree I understand. Like, we had these people to come in, these two ladies, and it was like a week-long unit in our class where they were like talking about, what is the word? Why can't I even think of it? This show, abstinence. What's that? But yeah, they were like very pro abstinence. Like, the only way to not get STDs, they're showing us like, dicks full of like pus, with the clap and all that, and all these malformed babies from STDs and everything. And so like, I get it, and like, but I feel when you don't answer those questions, like the birth control, and all you're worried about is this. Yeah. It's like,
it doesn't prevent pregnancy.
It does. Getting married. Right. In fact, well, once you have this, then get pregnant is probably like the message, But like,
you're safe now.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's just, I feel like it didn't work because people are like, oh, well, I know people that have sex and like don't get STDs and don't get pregnant. Yeah. So it's like, what you're telling me is not what I'm seeing amongst my peers who are sexually active in high school.
How about the moral implications of saying you shouldn't be, like, I was a slut for asking how birth control works in front of a classroom full of students.
Was that the implication?
Yeah, you don't need to be worried about that. You just need to be worried about this.
Gotcha.
Purity culture, right? Like, why are you concerned without being married about birth control? Just don't have sex until you're married.
Gotcha. Okay.
There's so many implications behind that answer.
Sure.
And I was embarrassed.
Gotcha. So it's like, even
that's where the taboo starts.
Well, like, let's pretend that even for a second you shared her value. Yeah. I still want to know why. Like, what is going on in my body? Yes. When I take this. Right. Because I'm interested in the mechanism by which it works. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And so I feel like when she's like, oh, you don't need to worry about like that, it's like, it's encouraging ignorance. Yeah. It's like skirting the actual. We're in the classroom, trying not to be ignorant. And then there's another level of ignorance, which is just prescribing birth control no matter what, So I had a student during Zoom class when everybody was online. It was interesting. Students asked more questions because they could interrupt more easily just by texting through the chat, right? Well, I had students directly messaging me all of a sudden, like, just to Kendall. Because I was participating in Zoom meetings. Even though I wasn't a lecturer, I had to attend all the lectures. And I had a student, we talk, they love cancer. Students love cancer so much because everybody's been affected by cancer. Sure, and it's like the great unsolvable ailment. And so one of the things that we discuss in the class is that
prolonged and increased exposure to estradiol can improve or increase your likelihood of developing breast cancer for people with a certain target gene.
Okay.
And just in general. And so I had a student, she goes, Kendall, is that true? Does that mean like women who take birth control are more at risk of getting breast cancer? I said, yeah. And she goes, so we're just screwed, taking...
It's like, if you have that gene,
Yeah, or just
it's
you
more
wouldn't
likely,
know because how many people are getting genotyped? You just aren't.
Oh, yeah, that's not a common thing.
Yeah, and so...
I haven't done it.
Yeah, me neither. I want to. I think...
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, for sure.
And so, but just that alone, like, just put them on birth control, like, or that's like the only thing people do with a girl who is promiscuous or experienced sex earlier than their parents want them to. Just put them on birth control and then don't have a conversation because at least you won't get pregnant.
Yeah,
But then there's all of the other health implications of having sex.
For sure.
Whatever.
And I think it also like I think birth control. Well, I actually don't even have an opinion. So let me rephrase. I think birth control can divorce the act of sex from reproduction.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that conversation,
yeah.
It's like because you're still engaging in sex, the chance of pregnancy drops
right
significantly,
right.
Very successfully, but I still think it makes it super casual. I'm not anti having sex before marriage by any means.
But the conversation still hasn't had the responsibility.
Right. Exactly. Yes, there is a
yeah.
responsibility. It's like, okay, like it could fail and you could get pregnant.
Which people don't even know why it fails. If you don't take it within the same 3 hours every day. I've been taking birth control for 10 years now.
Uh-huh.
I can count on 2 hands, probably 1 hand, the number of times I've forgotten to take the pill. And I've taken it by the next morning, so within 12 hours.
And you've got to be like...
I'm in the top 90%.
I was about to say, it was like, that is not common.
And I wouldn't trust any man over me taking my birth control because I understand how it works. I understand the mechanics of how it works. And therefore, I can take the responsibility with the knowledge of how it works. Right. And that's what I wanted to know in that moment.
For sure. Exactly.
I wasn't signing up for birth. I was 14, and I didn't start taking it until 19.
Yeah, I'm not saying I even want to have sex now. I'm just saying, how does this work?
Well after I was on
birth control. So it's like... Yeah. So, yeah, for sure.
Isn't that crazy? And I also, that same class, Miss Fish was the name of my biology teacher in freshman year. I asked her, we were learning about the Krebs cycle, and all of that, and that's just so complicated. You see these diagrams, see all these little acetyl-CoA.
Yeah.
Stuff. And I just asked her, I said, Miss Fish, how do we know this is real? You can't see it. How do you measure it? And now I know. I would love for someone to ask me that. Well, you add in a certain substrate and you see an output of this, and you can say, okay, well, obviously this protein, you knock out this protein, you see it doesn't produce this. Like we can understand the cycle by eliminating parts of the cycle, adding things.
Right. By basically determining what is not true.
She had no answer. She goes, I don't know. Just do your assignment. I said, okay, well, then for the purpose of this class, I'm not going to believe that the Krebs cycle is real. I'll do the assignment, but I don't believe that it's real. Yeah. That's what I told her. And that's the attitude I had as a future bioinformatician.
Yeah, attitude check.
Yes, but also...
How old were you?
I was 14, 13,
something
like that. And I was just like, I don't believe in it then.
Yeah.
And what is she going to... she could have had the answer. She doesn't know the answer because she's a high school biology teacher. Right.
And that's not to say that there are high school biology teachers that don't know.
But the attitude starts there. The inability to answer the in-depth question starts there. And a better response from her could have been, let's look it up.
Yeah. Hey, if you have time, I've got to grade some papers, but hey, maybe next week, let you and I look into this together.
Yeah, because that's a good question. I want to understand it.
And I think more importantly, what that would do is it instills the value of discovery.
Yes.
Because then you have then you have the experience with someone, and so it turns the experience of discovery into something positive, and then the value is in the learning.
Yeah.
Which I think is what is hard. It's hard to take 25 kids and instill the value of learning when you have a curriculum that you have to get through, and maybe some of the stuff in the curriculum is necessary and some of it isn't, but a lot of it is, and so it's like, well, maybe I don't think they need to know all of this, and I wish that these things were in it, but they do need to learn. And so we just got to plow through this stuff. So I don't envy teachers, and my sister's a teacher. We talked about a little bit of this in the last
How's she doing?
She's doing good.
Okay.
Yeah, she's doing well. But like,
is she trying to quit teaching now, like everybody else seems to be?
I mean, she wants to do her food Instagram full time.
Yeah, it's more rewarding.
More rewarding and all that. But like, there's also like, not only do you have like the bulk students, there's also the parent factor.
And that's something I was so privileged not to have. Is FERPA, I could not talk to students' parents about anything. I couldn't even confirm if they were present in my classroom or enrolled in my class. Because they are 18 years old and they are fully in charge of their education, and that is such a beautiful thing. So I feel so bad for teachers who have to deal with parents in the classroom, because parents aren't teaching their kids at home.
Right, and that's the issue. It's like, well, the parents who are involved, like some of them are overbearing, but like a lot of them, like you can tell who puts the effort into their kids.
Yeah.
And they're the ones coming to the conferences, you know, they're the ones making sure their kids are doing their homework.
They probably have more understanding for the teachers.
Yeah.
It's the ones that don't parent their own kids that come and say, well, my kid's acting out in your class, that's because you don't know how to manage a classroom. Well, you don't even know how to manage your own one kid.
For sure,
so,
for sure.
You know, blaming a teacher for managing 25, 26 kids
right,
at a time is insane.
Right. It's like you haven't met the base needs of social interaction.
Yeah, the child that you're genetically connected to.
Right. You haven't given them the tools to interact successfully with other 10-year-olds.
Yeah.
And which, by the way, they're a little bit screwed, because once they're over the age of 5, if they haven't learned to like interact with kids with their age by that time, like they're basically going to have a hard time with that. Not to say they can't learn it, but it's going to be a struggle, and could be a decades-long struggle.
Yes. Yeah.
So, you know, just like those first 5 years, man, critical.
I know. If I think I could do anything, sometimes I think I'd be a kindergarten teacher.
Yeah.
Because I'm really good with 5-year-olds. I think it's the most beautiful age.
Oh, they're awesome.
They're just the best.
I love kids.
And it's funny, as my mom was staying with me during COVID on and off just to visit. And so she saw a little bit, because we were all at home and I was teaching online. And she saw how I commanded the classroom. And I don't believe in power or, control. But I really commanded the classroom, and I really commanded it in person. Like, I am just like on fire in the classroom. Like, it's the coolest thing. And I'm like, all right, everybody stop, because it's chaos.
Sure.
And you got to command instantly.
Right.
Because we've got fire on the table. We've got like harmful juices in the air, like getting squirt in the eye and stuff. So it's really important, and it's chaos, but it's very controlled chaos. And so I had to really command, and the students had to listen to me instantaneously. And I was like a foot shorter than all of them, but
So you got to bring the personality.
I was the leader of the classroom, and my mom, she commented on that. She goes, "You remind me so much of your kindergarten teacher, Miss Woods." It's chaos with a bunch of 5-year-olds, and she was so good at transitioning you guys from cutting paper to doing this. All right, I want everybody on the floor at 5, 4, 3. I was doing similar stuff with my students because it's boring and you don't know what you're doing, and they trust so much in me to give them the experience that they're paying for, and I honor that. I really honor that. I hold them to really high standards, but I'm going to help to even higher standards.
I mean, high standards are like the ultimate compliment.
Yes. And I told my students, yes, because I believe you can achieve them.
Yes, right.
And so I always told them, I said, an A is 90% discipline, 10% privilege.
Explain that.
90% discipline is I'm giving you everything in this classroom. In some classrooms, you're fucked because the professor is stupid.
Sucks, yeah.
Can't give you the tools you need. My classroom, I'm responsible for giving you everything you need to get an A in this class. You just have to be disciplined to do it.
Sure, yes. And then yes, that's 90%. And then explain the 10% privilege.
10% privilege is you have a stable home to go back to.
I understand. Gotcha. I see.
I think students with straight A's really need to acknowledge they don't have to work too.
Like if you're going home and you've got like, a driftwood table, weird example, but just like some bullshit environment,
right?
Where it's hard to get work done.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, I've got a kid.
You're not responsible for an ailing parent.
My babysitter leaves when I get home from class, so I've got to do my studying with a kid, and so that can be hard.
And so I broke a lot of rules for my students in my class. I said, the rules of the university don't apply in the classroom. I agree with a lot of the rules of the university, but I let a lot of rules go. So I never required them to show me doctor's notes or anything. Because if they're lying to me, I don't give a shit. That's on them.
Dude, so true.
Because I don't care if they have got a D in the class. I'm still going to bring my 100% of myself and still give them all the feedback. Anything. I had a student who turned in every assignment, still had an E. She turned in everything. Most students with an E, they don't turn in anything. That's why they get, they fail a class.
That was me.
Yeah, which
I was the one who I was like, I'll turn everything in and I'll go to every class, but I wouldn't study or anything.
Yeah,
and that was like my point of pride. It's like, I'm present and failing.
Yes.
That's the hill I'll die on.
That's an interesting student type because most students are just totally checked out and they get an E because they don't even try. The student she wasn't trying. I don't know. The word try is really, there's a lot of implication there, but she was turning everything in to completion. And I would sit there and grade it and provide feedback, which I just wanted to beg her, please stop turning stuff in because it takes up so much of my time.
Right. If you're just going to hand in some trash.
I'm going to bring myself to the table and provide all of the reasons. And I would write sample examples of like how to respond to this.
Question.
Yes. And I put in so much time to grading because if the students are going to do an assignment, I'm going to honor their time by providing the feedback. And at one point, and I'd have them after quizzes, I'd have them draw pictures on the back, like just like
fun.
Kindergarten class. And I'd draw pictures back, or I'd complete their picture and answer it or something, just to kind of like build a little bit of
relationship. Yeah.
And the students who didn't want to, that's not a big deal. I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm not like, oh, offended. You're not relating to me. You don't think I'm cool. You're not trying to be my friend. But this student, she would draw like broken hearts and stuff, and I would say I'd like draw a little heart called her broken heart's hand, be like, here with you, let me know if you need help or something. And at the end she was at a straight E in the classroom and she said, Kendall, I love you. You have been my favorite teacher I've ever had in my life, and you mean a lot to me. And I never she never in my office hours, we never really spoke. I just would draw little hearts on her page and she would never engage with me, she would never speak, but I got to know her through this feedback system. And I couldn't believe that a student that I was failing, I was the best teacher she's ever had. I was like, that means a lot. I printed that out.
Nice. For sure.
That's like a testimonial because I had students who were failing and they really loved me because I believed that they could do it and I never gave up on them. Even though I held them, I'm not going to chill out an A because I don't care about it. I'm here and I want, let's talk about it. And students would come to my classroom, you took off half a point. Why? Like, that's what I meant. I said, well, I can't read your mind. You understand it from my perspective. I walk through, and so much of teaching is just empathy and providing perspective and mentorship through the emotional hurdle of overcoming the discipline.
Sure.
That's all it is. And I get it. I tell them all the time, like, I don't have the discipline to get an A in this class. If I were in your shoes, I would not be getting an A in this class.
For sure. I totally get that. Yeah, I mean, that was my character arc. Still is. Yeah. Post college though, because I got this degree that I don't use. Awesome. I learned a lot though. It was like heavy personal development.
Yes.
We did like a lot of or I did personally a lot of like backpacking trips. One of them being 3 weeks long. Yeah. One of them being 11 days in Costa Rica. Like.
You learned probably all kinds of applicable things, endurance.
Oh my gosh. Body works, how to survive, but also just like there's a lot of leadership skills.
Yes.
And like phases of groups where it's like like you get together, like in the initial phase, and then like you're storming it's like the storming phase of a backpacking group, whether it's like a research group and you're out in the field or just like you're leading the trip for tourists or whatever. You're isolated and the group is getting to know each other, and there's like, how do you live together?
Yeah.
How do you travel together?
Yeah.
Who's navigating? How are we doing the education for all the different parts of like navigating the backcountry? And so you're storming, things are kind of going well, personality clashes, and then you get to like this norming phase where it's like, okay, things start to level out. And so just like the whole process of like learning how to manage groups, like there was this like we each shared like leader of the day on this one trip, and on my first day as leader of the day, it was our longest day. We had to go 10 miles and it was raining the whole time, and we had to like be mobile for most of the time, so least amount of breaks, longest distance, and it's raining. And because of that, like people are getting tired because we're moving more than normal, and you have to like remind people snack, like it's just weird thing.
I know.
It's like you have to remind people to like fuel themselves and like do this thing, and you have like people starting to break down and crying, so it's like, okay, like and people are crying because like this person is like petty stuff just comes up, and but that's just how it goes. And a lot of that was so good, but so I learned a lot about like just like leadership development, but then post college I was just like, well, so the day before the day after that 10-day hike, or 10-mile hike, we sat and we did this thing called it was like the isolation day or solo day or whatever it was. And basically you were alone in the woods for, I think it was 22 hours. And you also didn't get a tent. They gave you like a tarp, and then you had to...
Absolutely.
And then you had to make your structure, and then you were just by yourself. It was like my come to Jesus moment with myself. Oh my God, it was amazing. Because I kind of had this attitude the whole time, like, I'm here because I have to be. I'm in this major because I have student loans, and I've fucked up enough to where now I'm at this point where I just like have to get a degree. Right, I have to get this degree. And I just sat and I journaled like all my insufficiencies about myself, just like totally honest, and like I'm codependent on my friend group. Like I've put my value on how I interact with my friends, because like I didn't care about school. I just cared about hanging out.
Yeah.
And I lived with 10 roommates, co-ed, and so like that was like my family.
Wow.
And so I defined myself by like my relationship with them. But that's all I had. I had like no job skill set. I mean, I had a paper route before I was 16, then I worked at Panera for a while.
Putting things out.
Pulling things in. Yeah, and so like I was like, okay, well, you're gonna have, and they're gonna graduate, like, you know.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, right. And they actually already had, this was like after my senior year, so a lot of my friends were like moving on, and like basically I was just like real honest with myself for the first time, and it's a game changer, dude, when you take accountability. And then so like post college, I was like, okay, like I wasn't getting the job similar to your thing.
Yeah.
I was like looking for rec jobs, and like there were some, but like they wouldn't like experience, and I didn't even have experience. I had a degree in recreation with no recreation experience outside of like a couple backpacking trips. So like I ended up working at this hotel, and while I was at the hotel, it was very humbling, because I was like, okay, like my minor was ecotourism. So I was like, tourism, hotel, you know, okay, whatever. And I started really just like getting into like being disciplined, the study of discipline and all of that. And in my head, I was like, I hope I don't take this too far. Like I took, like it was when I didn't drink or smoke or do anything like that in high school. And when I got to OU, I was like, okay, I did that. Now I can kind of enjoy myself. And and maybe there's an argument that I went too far, but like, I was like, okay, well, I don't want to go too far into the discipline thing, you know, like I don't want to swing the pendulum too far to the other side. Well, I realized like, that's actually almost impossible to swing too far into the realm of discipline, because the more you like learn and study and control the things that you can, like the more freedom you have, and the more opportunities open up, the more doors you can walk through. And so it's like, and it's like a constant thing. Like every morning you have to choose to do those things. So it's like, it's just been like the ultimate liberator. So like, if you're able to convey that to like a group of students and teach them to that while they're in school, oh my gosh, it's like, it's just like such a level up if you can master the act of doing things you don't want to do.
That's so much. And so what I noticed, and what everybody's noticed in the education field, probably beyond, is that the tolerance for doing things you don't want to do is through the floor.
It's abysmal.
Especially since COVID. And I don't know that it has anything to do with COVID or being online for a little while, because we were only online for like a semester or two. And so how did that, like, I don't understand. I think it's so much more than that, and I don't know what it is, and I think a lot of people don't know what it is, but there's so much resistance between the students that I had in the first 3 years that I taught and the students that I had in the last 3 years that I taught.
Like they're way more resistant now.
Way more resistant to doing anything.
I think and this is just me, so like this is not a fact.
No, I'm curious. Or anything. Yeah.
I just think it's just like complacency.
I think I don't know. It's like there's
like we were all told to stay home.
Yeah.
Like, and this is not me passing any judgment on the lockdown.
Right.
This is separate from that.
Right.
It happened.
Yes.
We were all home.
Yeah.
And we were all home, you know, depending on your profession, some longer than others. We all got stimmy checks, and we all know that like, and people have different opinions on how the government blew it, depending on where you land. But everyone can kind of come to a consensus that things were blown.
Yeah.
From a government perspective.
Yeah.
And so there's like that lack of trust. We were all home for a bit. So it's like, oh, well, I think it's just like a little bit of like nihilism where people are just like, I don't care. The government's effed, which like all governments have always been that way.
High schoolers aren't as checked into that.
I agree. I think there's trickle down vibes. Like mindset, like they hear their parents talk about it, they hear all of that. And then it also just depends on like what the home life was while they were doing a year's worth of online schooling, some schools longer. And so like
I think there's a lot of passes given for a lot of things that could have been held accountable for, and
the standards, dude. People are
standards were so through the floor too.
Yeah, people are just getting passed on. I mean, that was a question Sean had me ask my sister Lisa.
Yeah.
Like, you have these kids that are, because she doesn't set the standards.
No,
you know?
I know, and I've heard that teachers aren't even allowed to give students less than a 50%.
Yeah, so it's like a committee. There's like a committee,
50%.
so it's like she was telling me that kids are more likely to be held back in like kindergarten, first grade. She teaches fifth grade, but like if she wanted to fail someone, it would be like she would have to like bring it to. She didn't go into detail, so I don't know the whole process, but like some sort of committee. There'd be like administrative decision making on whether or not that kid. So it's like she doesn't even have full control of whether or not she could hold a kid back if they weren't meeting standards. And you've got kids in middle school and high school who like can't read and don't know their shapes and just like BS like that.
Isn't that crazy?
And so it's just like, and so if those kids are going to college and now they're getting hit with standards, like how we were talking about earlier in the conversation of like the whole graph reading thing, it's assumed they know how to do that or whatever. Well, if they don't even they have zero scientific literacy, their math skills are abysmal, like, and then they're expected to do these things, like, is the dropout rate gonna just like go through the roof? Or dear God, hopefully universities don't lower standards, because then we're just gonna have a bunch of morons doing moron shit in all the fields,
Sean and I talked about that. I told him I don't know that we agree on this exactly, but I told him I think we will feel the very real effects of this in our lifetime, of the pendulum swinging towards this complacency and lack of education. I think we are going through an intellectual dark ages.
Dude, for sure.
Definitely.
It was like 2 years ago. Sean and I were talking. Sean is Kendall's boyfriend
Love
and one of my closest friends. He married me and my wife. And he's in the title sequence. That's who's in the title sequence of this. Sorry for name dropping, but it was like 2 years ago. I was like, I can't wait for 5 to 10 years from now when we actually know what happened post-COVID. Yes. But again, not talking about like where it came from or the lockdown. Yeah. Like, I wish we knew more of that, but like the ramifications of the lockdown and everything. I was like,
the benefits too of it.
Sure,
because everybody started baking and all this stuff.
For sure,
like, something so
the next level baking.
The idea of work from home and how it's provided so much
that's good.
agency and
that's
flexibility.
For sure. So 100%, the pros and cons. But I'm just so curious what the 2020 hindsight is going to be in 5 to 10 years. 3 to 8 now.
And not just that. I told him too, with COVID specifically, there is plenty of evidence, and we are understanding long COVID now more in the last 3 months than we've ever understood it.
Cool.
Especially from Canada's done these mass long COVID studies. And we're finding, talking about associations, we are finding an association between long COVID brain fog and increased car accidents. Things like that.
Sure.
The plane industry is falling apart right now.
Boeings are literally falling apart.
And we have people who are in germ tubes all day, responsible for flying. Our pilots are experiencing infection after infection after infection, and it is having actual neurological effects. Basically, if we let COVID run rampant, and this is my opinion, and it's based in a lot of the stuff that I've read, clinical studies, peer-reviewed studies, that we are going to have a disabled population, a huge population. Portion of our population is going to be functionally disabled.
Gotcha.
And it's going to affect our economy and everything.
So this is speculation.
Yeah.
If we're speculating, what percentage of the population? So let's say, like, back in the day, like if you did the math of like percent of people that got COVID and then percent of people that had bad symptoms.
Yeah.
It's
how mild,
super mild.
Right.
Not to say that it wasn't more than the flu, which it was.
So there's something out of the UK saying that about a third of the population is having to call off work consistently. So about a third of the population is facing long COVID.
That's way more.
It's insane. We are going to feel it. I don't know when, how, in what way, but we're going to feel it. I have this really strong feeling that we are going to feel the effects of letting it run rampant and disabling slowly over time. People are more sick than ever right now. And I don't know. Now, this could just be because we got so used to masking. Yeah, we could have gotten so used to masking that way. I never get sick anymore because I mask on buses and stuff like that. And when I'm super spreader events, which is every time I get on a bus with somebody who's been around 50,000 people, I've never, we're all exchanging germs. I still mask because I am not going to get sick. I am not going to get my teammates sick. We are working on $10 million projects.
Sure.
I am not going to get sick.
Sure, okay.
For me, that's what it's about. But also, the more people get sick, COVID has... There are people making the case, reasonably so, in my belief, that COVID is basically the next AIDS epidemic. AIDS is autoimmune deficiency syndrome.
Yeah, for sure.
And COVID, after repeat infection, it increases your autoimmune probability of having autoimmune deficiency.
Okay, so hold that because I do want to talk about that. So I have heard what you said about masking, like the continued masking to prevent just sickness in general.
Yeah.
I've also heard that people have gotten more sick from masking due to not exposing themselves. How do you feel about that? Oh, okay. So you haven't heard that?
I don't hear that in the circles of
Gotcha.
research that I've So
gotcha.
I don't know where that's coming from, but I'd be willing to look into it. Now, what I have read is that microplastics are a big source could contribute.
Sure, yeah.
And that's a concern. You're like, screwed if we do, screwed if we don't.
Right.
But no, I think there's a lot of misinformation about immune systems in general. Like, there's nothing that can boost your immune system overnight. There's nothing that consistent health exercise.
Right, you can boost the immune system long term.
Over time.
I know. Well, so Sean, I'm not shitting on him, but
Sean's learned a lot since dating me.
For sure, I'm sure he has. Like those immune boosters.
Yeah.
You know, like
we talk about this.
Yeah, I'm like.
But you know what? To Sean's point, he makes this point. He's like, it could be placebo, but it works for me.
Yo, and
I love that.
Placebo is real.
It's very real.
You can will there's a certain amount of will.
Absolutely.
With regards to anything related to the body, immune system.
And we talked about this. I told him, I said, if you ever get an ailment or something where you're physically disabled and it's an issue of training yourself to work these muscles that, like, some people are told they'll never walk again. And consistent positive energy and the belief that you'll walk again.
And they do.
They do.
It's
and I told
real.
him, I said, I will be there to make sure you feel that way, like, to get you on that track.
For sure. No, it's
that's
real.
Make or break.
It's real. And like Sean even introduced me to the book. I'm sure he's probably told you the Becoming Supernatural.
Yes.
I mean, Dr. Joe Dispenza, like, measures the magnetic field, and it sounds like hoity-toity, but I mean, we all have one. And these people who have these experiences, very much nervous system related, where all of a sudden they basically convince their body to heal said ailment.
Yeah.
They have like this like euphoric experience and like some sort of like psychosomatic visual thing, and then they are better. And it's
which sounds crazy.
But it's measurable.
But if
it's measurable
for certain people. Yeah, I had a nurse recently that I went in and I had to get all these immunizations because I work with. I don't even work with the mice. I work around the mice because we're inducing diabetes in the mice and everything. We got a bunch of fat mice everywhere. It's really interesting. But yeah, she was talking about like. I can tell she's very into that. She's talking about manifesting and stuff. And I'm very skeptical. I come with a point of criticism towards everything. Sean introduced me to this guy on YouTube, and we had this kind of like thing about it where it's this guy talking about natural flavors and colors and preservatives and all this stuff, natural flavors. He uses buzzwords, though, that I think promote misinformation and stigma. And those buzzwords are chemicals,
Yeah,
words
for
like
sure.
chemicals. And so he's showing me this because Sean is sensitive to MSG and some other things. We don't know exactly what they are.
Oh, I'm aware.
But he has extreme inflammatory response, and it's very real. And I have a lot of respect for making sure that he's very comfortable eating whatever we eat in the household.
For sure.
I have MSG upstairs. I have a big thing of MSG. I put it on my, I eat it, and but I've read it is a neurotoxin. It can cause inflammation in the brain, and he must be super susceptible. And so he was showing me this, and he was really excited because there's somebody talking about it. And most people just kind of, oh, okay, what a diva, can't eat, can't eat Doritos, okay, But, and so he felt very validated by this person.
For sure,
the first thing that comes out of my mouth is, this guy's a quack. Yeah. And so he was kind of offended, and he's like, I just feel like blah, blah, blah. And I was like, and, I love Sean to death, so I never want to feel that I'm invalidating him. But, so we had this whole conversation that ended up being a really lovely conversation. I had a lot of fun. But about how that type of rhetoric, even though it's bringing attention to something he cares about and affects him so severely, it can be done in a better way.
Right. So it's good that the discussion has begun.
Yeah.
The quality of the discussion needs to be elevated.
Right.
Yeah, and so that's where the nuanced conversation comes in for sure.
And there's 100 various chemical flavorants that fall under natural flavors that are not, not regulated. The FDA is just call any of them natural flavors, and so there's a very real policy behind it that could be improved. I think that we should be so much more transparent about what's in the food that we eat. Much more. Even though I can eat anything and it doesn't, I have a stomach of steel. I eat tons of junk food, fast food, whatever. It doesn't affect me. Sean can't eat half of what are my favorite things to eat without being debilitated throughout the day.
Right.
And so,
poor buddy.
I know, makes it feel so bad. He can eat Cheetos and all the delicious, anything that tastes really good. And he's like, this can't be good for me. And he's gotten to the point where he is in touch with his body, so where he can feel it on his lips before he gets the migraine and the inflammation. He's like, this is not going to be good for me. Yeah. Sometimes he'll take the risk and he'll be like, I
want the mouth pleasure.
I want these egg rolls. Various things. But
Okay, let's switch gears again.
Okay.
Back to the COVID being the new AIDS story. So here's my experience. I got the Johnson & Johnson.
Yeah.
Which is different than the why am I blanking?
The mRNA.
The mRNA one. Yeah, and it was Pfizer and Moderna. Yeah. And then I had some of the symptoms. I just felt, and I don't know, and I've seen the data it's pretty solid, you got vax, not a bad thing. But I've also seen where if you get the COVID without having vax, your immunity is awesome post.
Yeah, for a certain amount of time.
Yes, for a certain amount of time. Same with the vax though.
Yes, yeah. It's doing the same thing.
Yeah, same thing. I remember feeling somewhat dirty and scared after having gotten the Johnson & Johnson, even though it wasn't the mRNA.
Yeah.
Just because it's of the gene therapy element to it, and just how fast it came out. And I remember being like, did I just do something that I don't fully understand? Because I understand vaccines. Yeah. And it's almost like the COVID vaccine is almost not even a vaccine. Yeah. In terms of what a technical vaccine is. And so I was like, am I basically just a real-time experiment? And I just felt dirty. I still got a booster, and that one was a Pfizer booster, I think. Pfizer or Moderna, I can't remember. And I think I got some symptoms from that. But anyways, so I haven't gotten boosted since. Yeah. I'm still skeptical on that whole mRNA thing.
The boosters nearly killed me. I got 103-degree fever every time I took one of, and it got to the point I was like, I'd rather have COVID.
Yeah. Well,
because it would debilitate me for 2 days with an extreme fever, and I don't know why, because my mom and my brother got it. They felt nothing. They're like, my arm's a little sore the next day, and I'm dying.
Right. 103 is hot.
103 is very hot. Yeah. And I woke up in the middle of the night. I'm 103, almost 104, and I'm like, do I go to the emergency room?
Yeah, because 106, you're talking brain damage. Yeah.
I brought it down. But
death.
Yeah, but it was scary. The mRNA vaccines have been in the works for over 10 years prior.
Sure, I knew they were working on it, but it was just the first time they had been administered in bulk.
Yeah.
And specifically with related to SARS-CoV-2. So I was just just sketchy. I was just like, I think I did what I was supposed to, because that's what I was told to do, but I just felt dirty.
Yeah, and I get that.
I felt emotionally dirty.
Thing.
Yeah, right.
And the education around it wasn't explain how it works. It's to just do it. Don't ask questions. Just
right. And I did, and
don't.
And so
then
I
had
felt
the election at the same time. It was just such
right, and I didn't, and I I felt like I had betrayed my own integrity a little bit, because I did something that I didn't understand. Yes. Based off, like, in general, groupthink. Right. Right. And so I ended up getting COVID March of 22. Flu symptoms, very achy. Yeah. Not terrible, but it was annoying. Like 2-3 days. I got it. Well, I can't remember if I got it again. But after I got it, I got sick again 3 months later. It was like March, so April, May, June. It was like June-ish, and I don't think I got tested, and it was somewhat similar. But it could have been flu, it could have been literally anything. Right. I don't think I got tested. If I did, it was an at-home one, and it came back negative. But those are kind of bullshit. And then 3 months later, so July, August, September, I think I got sick again. Again, similar-ish symptoms. And then in December, I got probably the most sick. This was December of 22 going into 23. I got like the most sick I had ever been in my life. And this is going to build back to that conversation we started. But like, we had our, like, it was like a work convention. It was this, I went the second day, and like that morning, I felt so terrible. I felt so tired. I had like slept poorly the night before, and I'd had a cough. This is important. I'd had a cough for like a week or two beforehand. Yeah. That was like pretty consistent and would sometimes wake me up. Okay. Like, what the fuck? And and I wasn't sleeping that well. I was at this thing, and we had a speaker going, and I'm like, I might shit my pants. Like, I need to leave. And so, like, I beelined it to the bathroom. Nothing really happened, so there's nothing aggressive. But I text my coworker who was at the meeting, and I was like, or the convention, I was like, can you please bring my backpack to the bathroom and leave it outside? I need to go home. Like, I am unwell. Kendall, that day, I lost 9 pounds. 9.
Holy cannoli.
Just coming out both ends.
Wow.
For back end for the most of it. And then that night, I like threw up, and when Tay got home, Tay's my wife, and when she got home, I was gonna drive to urgent care, and I was like, can you drive me to urgent care? Because I don't know what's going on. This is crazy. And came back negative for COVID. Came back negative. Like, RSV was big. I know that's more for infants, but like,
I got RSV from Calvin.
Oh yeah. And so that came back negative. Everything, like, flu was negative. Everything was negative. And
everything's negative on everybody's test these days.
Right, and and I know there's variations in all these new COVIDs, and so I don't know if it was that, but it doesn't really matter what it was. But it was like, and the next day, same thing, and then the next day, same thing, and I was able to like start having water, but I also had this cough that had happened before the stomach, the gastrointestinal issues, and it was keeping me up. And at 3 a.m., like clockwork, every night, I would wake up and I would just be coughing so much I would feel like I'd have to throw up. Not from stomach issues, just from like the force. Yeah. And I was like, had Vicks all over me. Like, I was sleeping in our guest room, and like, it was terrible. I was miserable. And so like cognitively throughout the day, like just from very little food and not sleeping, I was just like, just so debilitated. Yeah. I couldn't even really watch TV. Like, I didn't care what I watched. My stomach was would go in and out of painful knots. And finally it started getting better. This was like a Wednesday to Monday sort of thing. I went back to work Tuesday, and I ended up having like a 10 or 12 hour day. Doesn't matter. But I also have like my Whoop, so I was tracking my heart rate variability and my resting heart rate, and I was just like, oh, I'm so fucked. Yeah, my resting heart rate was so high. My heart rate variability was so low. And so I was just, and I knew that this was going to be months of recovery just to get those numbers back to like an acceptable average. And it was like to the point where like I was having like I also was having like asthmatic symptoms, like shortness of breath and like that sort of thing. And so the stomach stuff ended. The cough persisted though, and it was just like I was like struggling to like coach my classes and that sort of thing. And I was like forcing myself to run because I knew that like if I did nothing, it was going to continue to get worse, sort of thing. And it was like casual, like I would do walks.
Yeah.
It was like I know my.
It's funny because that's one of the things that they tell you if you have a severe COVID infection. If a potato doesn't do it, you shouldn't do it. Like stay as inactive as possible because people are developing the myocardia dysfunction. Because they are
trying to do
stuff or drinking caffeine too. So I think I had COVID once. I can't confirm it because it was in November. And there's no you have to get recommended by a doctor to get a test anymore, like a PCR test, which is the only test I really believe.
Right, for sure.
And I took the little swabs and stuff. Nothing showed up. So, but I don't know what that means.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
Yeah, those are like useless.
For sure.
That's my biggest. I'm just upset that we can't know anything.
I saw your thread.
Yes.
I don't go on threads much, but I got notified.
Yes, and I'm just like, if there's no access to knowing for sure. So my thing is every chance that COVID has the ability to replicate is a chance for a random mutation to make it worse. And that's my only thing is reduce the chance for it to replicate.
For sure.
And so, but anyway, they say that, you know, when you have a severe infection, not to do anything because it can affect. And so I noticed that I had Sean makes these the lattes with eggs in them and stuff.
Yeah.
They're actually so good. They sound disgusting, but they're really good. And so I was really getting into that, and we were putting hot chocolate in it and all kinds of gross stuff. So like a mocha egg concoction. And I drank one, and I'm usually really fine with caffeine. I can take naps after caffeine, you know. But I was panicked, and I was like,
oh yeah, I was off the caffeine.
I had like because I have my thing, and I get zone minutes, which is how
in your heart rate zones,
full 60 seconds above a rate of 120 beats per minute for me and my body and stuff. That's how it's set. And so I went and I just transferred, like I was doing the cell work on the weekend by myself. It's usually really relaxed. Sometimes I'm a little stressed because it's like, I can't screw up, you know, like it's a $10 million project. Like I can't mess these things up. But I'm sitting and I'm transferring media and it took 20 minutes. I had like 60 zone minutes.
Wow.
And I felt panicked and I felt like weird, and I never feel panicked. I'm very relaxed. I know.
For sure, I hear you.
Yeah, and that really freaked me out. And so I was like, I probably have COVID, but I can't tell. I don't know.
Right.
And so I just stayed away from everybody because that's my belief is to reduce the spread as much as you can.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, I was isolated in that room for so long.
Yeah.
I'll get that later. But there it is. So the cough persisted after my issues, and so I did I can't remember what the term is, but where you do like the video chat with the doctor.
Yeah.
And this was so interesting that I explained like my history with COVID, and I had when I was 3 years old in Cincinnati, I had extremely bad asthma, and I got pneumonia twice in 1 year, and they thought I had cystic fibrosis, and like I was like going to the hospital doing nebulizer treatments. Went away when we moved to Columbus. Never had an asthma attack again. And like asthma is typically for life, so it was like super strange.
Yeah. I wonder if it was like a pollen induced.
Could be. But then my senior year, they gave me an inhaler of college because I was having a persistent cough throughout my senior track season. They're like, sounds asthmatic. Went away. So like I told them that, like, hey, there could be, I was like, I don't know. I've had COVID and I've been sick on like 3-month intervals. And over the Zoom, they gave me cough syrup and inhaler and like other stuff. I was like, what? I was like, I could have, well, not only that, but I just couldn't believe I could just get meds.
Oh, yeah.
Just with the Skype or Zoom. I was like, yo, you're just going to give me some cough syrup?
I'm assuming the doctor's man, that's so sexist of me. But I'm assuming she wouldn't have even touched you had you gone into the office.
It could be. It could be. I don't know. But anyway, so I got that, and it eventually got better, and I was able to recover. And then I didn't get sick from that December until I think I got sick again in March. And then I wasn't sick and this is March 23 now. I didn't get sick until October, and then October I had a sinus infection. Yeah. And that was BS that was like a week or two of trash. But I haven't been sick since. So November, December, January, February, March. So it's been like 5 months. So this is like the longest stretch I've gone without being sick. And before I got that first COVID, I hadn't been sick since I had an allergic reaction to this cat that I got when Sean and I were roommates with Tay.
Did that bring the asthmatic stuff back?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it did. And before then, I hadn't been sick in forever. And so tying it all back to the conversation of COVID being the new AIDS, I felt immunocompromised.
Yes.
I was like, well, how am I getting sick on a 3-month basis now?
I never got sick either. And I've only been sick twice in the last 4 years. And I credit it to masks.
Yeah, and I was like not really sick at all in college. Yeah. Like we were drinking and smoking and like I got sick a couple times.
And I'm in DC, and I've never been a clean freak. Like you know, I will go from holding on to the rail in a metro to forgetting that I haven't washed my hands because I didn't go to the bathroom and I'm like picking my teeth.
Yeah, for sure. Same.
I've always been like that, and I'm still kind of like that. You know, so I just have to be a little bit more careful. But I still never got sick.
So I was like, I've been grateful. Like, okay, super sick in December 22. The cough persisted. That was like a month-long cough. Mm-hmm. What? And
that's awful.
Terrible. And then, maybe January to March, got a little sick, but not as bad. And then basically, we got sick on our honeymoon. That's what it was. I got sick on my honeymoon.
That's so sad.
Good thing we were gone for 2 weeks. But
where'd you go? Were you
somewhere? We're in Mexico.
Could you have gotten sick from?
For sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything. You never know. I mean, people get sick in Mexico. That's just like a thing.
Yeah.
And then the sinus thing was separate. And like, granted, like I was working more in my job. I'm on my feet a lot. And I'm also like, not only am I on my feet a lot, but I also had like administrative tasks. And sometimes I was getting up at 3:45 in the morning to be at work at 4:30, for the early morning classes. And so like, poor sleep, on your feet a lot. I'm also very active, running, lifting, all that stuff. So like, I could have been just doing too much and not fueling myself properly, or not doing like the sleep things properly, or any of the things. And so I really tightened on my habits as far as that stuff goes. And this is the longest stretch I've gone without being sick and all of that. So I'm hoping that it's like over the past year and 3 months or so, I've been building my immunity back up after that like extreme sickness. And and I'm very consistent. And I really started hitting the sauna during the sinus infection. That was like the first thing I started doing to build back up. And I also been doing more cold plunge stuff, and both those trigger increased immune response. And so I've been good since then, but I'd be really curious now just to hear like what you mean by COVID being the new AIDS.
It's essentially that, right? So the more infections we get, COVID is basically able to subvert our immune system, which is why so many people carry it asymptomatically, which you think, that's fine, right? Like, so what if I have COVID if I don't experience any symptoms?
And isn't like the goal, like a good virus doesn't kill the host, so it can spread more, right? Like, isn't that the idea?
Sometimes you do need symptoms like coughing to get it out of your body, but it's aerosolized, so just breathing it out. And so it's gotten really good at evading our immune system. But what it's doing is turning our immune system off. It's basically inactivating. It's like tricking it into not being infiltrated by foreign objects or foreign entities. And so the theory is it could do that for many other things, so we could get sick from a lot of different things. So even though COVID isn't causing symptoms,
it's tearing the walls down. So I mean, that is, people don't die from AIDS, they die from what they catch while they have AIDS,
exactly. And so I just wonder if we continue at the rate we're
speculation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I just wonder,
informed.
Yeah, over the years, if we continue to disable, like the people have been, I don't know the percentage, completely disabled by COVID. And our kids are getting it over and over and over again. And if there is a trend that it develops immuno issues, the kids are getting it over and over again. Like, what's that mean? Like, what's that going to mean? We just don't know.
Right, because originally it was like, kids aren't having symptoms, so who cares?
Yes. but they're killing grandma and grandpa by seeing
right.
it, you know? And so we're like, okay, well, if you're already immunocompromised, who needs to worry? But now everybody's becoming immunocompromised.
What was so weird, though, is when it happened, Tay was working at this, like, old person's facility. Like, and the average age was, like, 89. Mm-hmm. Like, this was, like...
Wow. Yeah, super old.
Yeah, not
End of life.
End of life. They were all super chill, though. I met him once. But there was an outbreak there that almost all of them got it. No one died.
That's amazing.
And so it was like, that was like, and this was like very early days. So that's why I was also like super speculative in the beginning. Because I'm like, if all these old people are getting it and not dying, and they're the ones who have like, you know, all the comorbidities.
Yeah.
Like, is it that bad? Is it that
bad?
bad?
And then so I told my students this when it first came out, and everybody was pretty nervous. I said, guys, just remember the flu kills 30,000 people a year.
Right.
We don't talk about it.
Right.
Which is a
30
problem.
to 60,000.
It's still a problem. I've never got a flu shot.
Oh, I still don't.
I mean, I've never gotten it because
I got it last year because I got it with my 2 years ago because I got it with the booster. I got it with the booster.
Yeah, I had to get it this year because my employer requires it. But yeah, I mean, I think we need to change our culture around being sick. I just think like, why aren't we making the small accommodations that it takes to protect people from getting super sick? It just doesn't make sense to me personally. I think it's such a small ask that when you have the flu, wear a mask and just chill out. You know, even if it's a surgical mask, it's better and you can breathe a lot more easily with a surgical mask. And just don't go around old people, you know, just like it's people coming sick to parties and all this stuff. You don't want to miss out. And I get that. But like, I have been ignorant myself on getting sick. Nobody in my family ever gets sick. And, you know, I've had like flu. I thought I had mono when I was a little kid and stuff. And we still went to school with colds and everything, you know.
Oh,
we're
yeah.
snotting on everything.
Like if I didn't have a fever, then I had to go to school.
Yes, yeah.
Which I get.
Yes.
I totally understand. Yeah. Also, like, from the childcare perspective,
what are you going to do?
Right.
We don't have the infrastructure in place or the policies in place to handle this type of thing.
And it's like,
and at the very least, I think it's brought a lot of attention to that, and I think that's
for sure
a good thing.
And net a good thing, and maybe we need to look at those. I just like, there's no such thing as a perfect world.
Yeah.
Or a perfect person. So let's set that up first. No such thing as a perfect person. Right. Oh, dude, love that song. But and so there's also no perfect solution. There's always like trade-offs, right? And so it's like, is it as good as it can get? Maybe not. It's probably pretty good though in terms of the system we have in place. I just like, it's not going to be me. I'm not the one who's going to figure it out. And that's not like voiding responsibility. I'm just not.
That's my take on free the nip. Love that women are doing that for us. Can't be the one to do it. I'm not going to be the one to free the nip.
Right. Well, I'm not going to be the one to fix the education system in terms of how childcare works. Like it is partially childcare, and so like I don't know what the rules should be. I don't even know how to speculate what the rules should be.
Yeah.
It's something that I guess all things are just ongoing systems that get tweaked, and maybe a system gets to a point where it is no longer strategically relevant and needs to be taken down and replaced with something new. Yeah. Is the process for auditing systems good? I don't know, because each system probably audits itself differently. You know, so it's just like these questions.
Yeah.
It's so easy to point fingers, and the system is flawed, but it also achieves its purpose. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, my take is you do what you can within whatever area. Like, I'm going to contribute as much as I can within the field that I'm in.
For sure.
In the area. And
For
like,
sure.
I'm not going to intrude on exercise training because that's
right.
like what you do. And I would expect that you do as much as you can to change that system.
For sure.
We just have a lot of bad players, though. People with either bad intentions or no intention, you know,
right.
to like make anything better. And we've given those people like really powerful positions to like do nothing.
Right.
And with this culture of apathy, it's
right.
going to get worse. And that's my fear.
Sure.
It's like we've got fewer people, fewer players in the system.
Yeah, you can't be apathetic. It is not cool not to care.
Yes, exactly.
But
you can't care about everything.
For sure. Because like no matter what information you get, you're automatically going to have an opinion. You can't help that.
Yes.
It's
but
like
also
recognize.
You can say, yeah, based on what I know right now, I don't like that. But to be fair, that's not my area.
It's not my area. And so I'll make decisions for myself and my family to the best of my ability. but also I'll take in feedback and more information as I go, and I'll pivot and change because I know that while I have to have an opinion and I have to make decisions based off it, I also don't know what I'm talking about.
But you can't disable your ability to make decisions by being afraid of making the wrong one.
Because you have to make decisions. You have to make decisions. Well, it's the same for this podcast. Like, this is episode 2. I'm still getting equipment. I'm still figuring stuff out. And like, it's like, if you wait for the moment to make the perfect decision, the moment will pass you by.
Yeah.
And so it's like this like perfect, well, it's not perfect. It's like this combination of like going off your gut and making a decision based off information.
Right. And that is what makes a strong leader. My mom's the best leader of anybody I know. And she is fearless when it comes to making decisions because she does it with enough gut instinct and knowledge to be decisive, but also own when it wasn't the best decision, and she goes, we know that now and we can adjust. And
here's the information I know now and why this decision was bad.
And so I was talking about this with an academic. He's an associate professor now, and he's in this new bioinformatics team that I'm kind of like collaborating with, and he's like super brilliant. And I'm talking about, I'm like, going into industry, I want to make a lot of money, I want the work-life balance, blah, blah, blah. There's so many reasons to go into industry over academia, and I'm sick of academia, and maybe I'll go back to it. But anyway, so I'm talking to him about this, and he's like, I can't make the decisions fast enough. Like, the private sector has to make decisions because there's people, if it's a publicly traded company, or if there's a board and there's investors, you have to make decisions to meet those people's needs, their financial needs, whatever it is, or their demands. And he's like, I can't do that. I'm thinking too much. I get in the way of making a decision. And that's where I come in. I am the master of none. And I know everything, though. Like, I know a little bit about everything.
Yes.
And that gives me the big picture.
General skill set that you apply to a specific problem.
And also you can, the more you know in more areas, like entomology, evolution, ecology.
Oh my gosh. Like the transferable skills and knowledge is huge.
But it also helps you draw, the proper application of I can apply this to this issue, and we're gonna find a solution there.
Yeah,
it's big picture problem solving that I feel I am the most competent at. I don't need to be super specialized. I will find the specialized people, and that's why I told this guy, I said, when I start my own bioinformatics company, I will bring you on. You don't need to make this. I'll make the decision.
Well, that's what a leader. But that's what a leader. That's literally what a leader does. Though. It's like you find the specialists, and then you organize them towards the common goal.
Right, and then. But the specialists have a lot of them. They have a lot of emotions, right?
Sure.
Because they might not understand the big picture, or don't care to, or maybe they're not brought into the bigger picture.
Right.
And then they become a monkey. Produce this.
Right. Well, so it's like, here's the big picture. Hey, specialist, how would you solve this?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Here's my feedback for that. It's 70% your idea. Let's run with it. You know what I mean? Because then they feel empowered. Oh, I'm contributing to the problem.
But also they'll let them do good science. Because a lot of times the pressure to produce gets in the way of good science.
Right. The timeline.
That's
pressure.
where academics feel like they give up the good science to go into industry. Yeah.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
So it's really interesting and.
Yeah, it's interesting. So like. Where I'm seeing in the fitness industry is like, the past few years we've had like the body positivity movement.
Yeah.
Which like overall like comes from a very good place, and like growing up like in every waiting room in every grocery store, it's just all the fad diets, that was like the early 2000s. I mean before then, but like all that stuff was so popular. How to drop 10 to 15 pounds, how to do this, how to do that. And so like bringing awareness to the fad and how these diets don't stick because you're doing something too extreme, or you're doing something that doesn't work for your schedule, all of that. Like, all of that is a good thing. Now it's finding the balance of, okay, like, because just like anything, it can swing too far to the other side. So it's like, okay, you should feel comfortable in your skin. If you are 50 pounds overweight, here are the processes in your body that are hurting, and here are the risks for heart disease, diabetes, all these things that increase. Now, when you're younger, you actually have this like get out of jail free zone where you can kind of like up until like your mid to late 20s, if you switch it around, you almost have no negative benefit or no negative side effects if you pivot. And like find homeostasis.
My advisor said this really well. He did our most recent lecture, and he was talking about how the human body is probably one of the best built on the planet for endurance, because we can't run as fast as a gazelle, but we can run longer than a gazelle can. So it will become exhausted. It will do short sprints and be able to get us, but we trace it till it dies of exhaustion.
Right.
And he said, so we've built these systems, we've evolved these metabolic processes where taking in too much sugar and gaining weight is not an issue in the short term.
Right.
We have a huge tolerance for that sort of thing too, but over time.
It's over time.
It's over and so it ends up killing you in the long run, which is so unfortunate, because like you said, you build up these habits in childhood that then things shift in adulthood, and you don't have the time, the flexibility, the discipline, the practice, or the knowledge to do so.
Right. So it's like, now I'm 28, and I'm not speaking for myself, but just like random case study.
Yeah.
Now I'm 28. I haven't been eating well. It hasn't impacted me too much, but now, like, my blood glucose is high, and it's now starting to have an effect on what I'm going to be like when I'm 50. The cascade effect has begun in all the systems.
Yeah.
And so it's like recognizing that, like, someone who comes into the gym who is overweight belongs there just as much as everyone else, which I'm a firm believer in.
Right, and there's no morality.
There's no morality. Yeah, right. While also acknowledging, like, I guess it also depends on what's your goal. It also depends on your knowledge. You can have the knowledge and be okay with the consequences. If you're here for a good time, not a long time. Like I personally can't relate. Like, I'm here for a good time and a long time. And so, like, I'm trying to maximize lifespan and health span, which, that Outlive book by Peter Attia, that is the game. That is the game.
And he does say that, now, he says that hunger is the key to longevity. Because in every system, we've studied this in nematodes, in Drosophila, which is fruit flies, rats, mice, pigs, dogs, plants. Anything that's given fewer carbs or fewer nutrients is that's a little bit starved lives a lot longer.
Talk about cancer risk reduction.
But that's in a closed system. That's not in a natural system where you might be exposed to famine or disease.
Right.
And so having a little extra,
because you still starve to death.
Right. And that's why it's maintained in our society. That's why the prevalence of certain body types are maintained, because they can be advantageous under certain circumstances.
For sure.
Yeah, and understanding that.
And recognizing that the human, like, the thing that defines humanity is adaptation.
Yes.
We have the least amount of pre-programming when we're born.
Yeah. And
we are the most adaptable. Like, that's why you've got, like, people in like the Inuits, way north in, like, these, like, tundras.
And they're eating only fat diets.
Right.
And then all these no fat diet people, which was not based by science.
Oh, not at all.
Created by science.
It's like there's only 3 macronutrients.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, and they're there for a reason. It's like talk about the evolution as a whole.
Right.
Like, those are there because that is what is required.
Yeah.
So, it's like, and you can manipulate those. Like, there are some people that need more carbs. Some people need more fat. Like, you can manipulate those. It's like, do you feel good?
Yeah.
Like, can you do stuff? If you can't do what you want to do, then do that more.
Right.
You have, like the pull-up is the best example.
Yeah.
How do I get better at pull-ups? Well, you do them. Well, I can't. Well, like,
then hang.
Hang.
Yeah.
Work on grip strength. Get a step. Hold yourself up here. Control lower. Yeah. And then eventually, like, because that's the eccentric is where you build the strength, and so it's like. And then eventually you'll be able to do one. Well, how do I do more than one? Keep doing one.
Yeah.
Rest. Reduce your rest. Reduce your rest towards 30 seconds, then 15, and then you can do 2 in a row. Right. And then it's like, okay, now I'm doing sets of 2. And so, like, and that's literally anything in exercise. Oh, I don't know. I can't cut 500 calories all at once. Don't. Yeah. Cut 100.
It's not sustainable.
You don't need to lose.
And you won't feel good. You will imbalance your homeostasis and feel really bad. If
you don't need to lose, like, healthy fat loss or weight loss, anywhere from a half pound to a pound a week is healthy. You can lose a quarter pound a week. Or even if it's less, like you build up in deficit if that's what you're trying to do, or you don't need to do that. Maybe you don't need to lose weight and you just feel bad because you don't move your body. Like, there's any number of things.
Which is where I want to do more muscle building. And it's just the key to health for women. It has even more benefits.
Oh, it's huge
as you age.
And it's one of the biggest predictors of longevity as well.
Yes.
In addition to the starvation
Which
thing.
is why we're studying. That's why we study this. It's going to revolutionize the way that we age and help old people. You know, the fastest way to kill an old person is keep them in bed all day. You know, and not do anything. Yeah.
That Peter T was talking about. They don't know how. Similar to like you don't know how the lack of the receptor is causing them to bond together.
Yeah, we don't know the pathway.
The pathway. But there's a correlation between grip strength and Alzheimer's.
Yes.
What?
Same with brushing your teeth and stuff too with dementia. Yeah.
Wild. Grip strength? Like, that's crazy.
Well, so this is interesting. I was looking at this the other day, and I don't know for sure, but I would need to look at it. But Alzheimer's. So when we do, it's called gene set enrichment analysis, where we've got our knockout group for this taste receptor. We have our wild type group. We also have a young group and an old group, and we're doing 4 biologically relevant comparisons. So we're doing young wild type versus old wild type, old knockout versus young knockout, and then we do young genotype effect. So like anyway, so there's like 4 relevant studies to do. And so we do these gene set enrichment analyses, and it tells us whether proportionally, and I don't know if it's Bayesian or how it did, like the statistical background. And these things are just, you plug it in and it does it, and then you like take it out and you're like, okay, this is the science of it, which is kind of scary. So we're doing a deeper dive into all this stuff and trying to understand it, which is really cool. And nobody does this. Like my advisor is an incredible scientist. We're doing it right. He's doing it right, and I'm happy to be on a team that does it right. And so he's like, okay, let's do these gene set enrichment. And so we find that certain pathways are enriched or depleted within these 4 comparisons. So maybe there's certain pathways associated with mitochondrial function enriched in the old knockout versus the wild type, the old wild type, which shows that like they can maintain these functions as they age without this receptor.
Gotcha.
But when these things, they spit out pathways are named quite arbitrarily, and there's an Alzheimer's pathway. And so I'm like, well, what does Alzheimer's doesn't exist in your muscles? So what is really going on here? Why is this pathway being said that it's enriched? What proteins are going on in this
right? Is it like some sort of like nervous system activation?
Some nervous system, but a lot of mitochondrial, ATP, a lot of this stuff. So it overlaps a lot with these muscle-related things. And so if Alzheimer's shows up on muscle tissue, gene set enrichment analyses is kind of interesting when you say grip strength is associated with Alzheimer's, because a lot of the same proteins involved in muscle biogenesis and all of these other muscle health regulators are also within the Alzheimer's pathway.
That's crazy. And to you, the point...
And that could be its own 10-year study.
Right. Yeah. And to the point about the mitochondria too, like if grip strength, because you do grip strength over time, like, you know, you're holding your body weight or hanging, like a dead hang. Yeah. Like you're breathing, but like your mitochondria are like in constant work mode. Right. That entire time, and so you're almost like training your mitochondria that whole time. So that's interesting.
And you're also running out of that glucose from your meal. You're running out, and then
you're depleting your stores.
And then your liver's having to release more because your muscles say, "Hey, we ran out of glucose. Can you give us more?"
Yeah, you got to dump it into the blood.
And so your liver is completely depleted, and then starts burning fat. Right. And so it's interesting in these taste receptors. We find that we think we're skipping the glucose and going straight to fat. Straight to fat, which is really, really efficient. Yeah, incredibly efficient.
Kendall, it's about noon.
I know. I was gonna say, how are we doing?
That flew by. Yeah. I also have to pee like crazy.
Well, you're right behind, or right.
This is a bathroom?
It's a pee door. Yeah.
Oh my god. Awesome. Do you want to call it?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being guest number 2.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Well, I want to have you on again at some point, and we can talk more about evolution. Okay. Because I feel like you could just like deep dive into that. And to me, that was like the coolest thing. That was the thing I was most interested in biology.
Like, I have a PhD in evolution. In insect evolution, but it's all the same.
Full send. Yeah. All right, cool. Thank you so much. Peace out, everyone. Oh, do you want to like give people give you a follow or something?
No.
No. Don't follow her. Sweet.